I model upon you, O Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. The blessing of the feast of dedication. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Hayawam, Kanakah, Bashalawam, Tawada, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the feast of dedication and peace. Thank you, so be it. Quiet. Vaha'ayim Ma'ad Asherayim Akkad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Ayanyam Ya Oh Haharyam Mayan Yabawa'a Isaiah Yabawa'a Mayahawa Sha'isha Shemayim Wa'arataza La'a Jonathan Lamawat Regalia Yala'a Yanawam Shashamarka Hana La'a Yanawam Wala'a Yayashun Shashuama Yasharela Yahweh Shemaya Yahweh Tazalia Il Yad Yam Yin Ya Yawamam Hashemash La'a Hakaya Wayarat La'a Balayala Yahweh Yashemaya Makal Rai Yashemar Napasha Yahweh Yashemar Hawalakia Wabawaya Ma'aitha Wa'aid Iwalam Bahasham Yahawasha Fawada Aman.
Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. You will not suffer thy, you will shall lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. You will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, even forevermore.
Amen. Shema Yasharela, hear, O Israel. Shema Yasharela, Yahweh, Allahayanawa, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharela, Yahweh, Allahayanawa, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharela, Yahweh, Allahayanawa, Yahweh, Echad.
Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abba Yahweh, Shabbat Shemayim, Kodash, Hayah, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakwatka, Saba'ah, Batazawanka, Hayah, Aisha, Ba'arataza, Ka, Bashemayim, Natalanawa, Lakham, Yowum, Za, Wasalaklanawa, Kababathnawa, Kasalaknawa, Kababathyanawa, Wala'a, Habiyanawa, O, Messiahwan, Abo, Hawashinawa, Morai, Khiyai, Laka, Hamalakwa, Waha'ala, Wahatha Pa'ara, La'ayulam, Aman.
Matthew 6:9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'aishara Matazawaf, the Ten Commandments. La'ah, Yahaya, Laka, Alahayim, Akaryim, Alpanya, La'ah, Daisha, Laka, Pasol, Wala'a, Daibadam, La'a, Alakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayika, Lashua, Zakar, Ath, Hayawum, Hashabath, La Kodashwa, Kabad, Abiaka, Wa Amaka, La'a, Dratazak, La'a, Thana'at, La'a, Thagana, La'a, Thaina, Shakur, La'a, Thakama, Ko, Ashura, Lara'ayaka, Aman.
Exodus 20:2. I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy power in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy power. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Yeshua, be seated. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Natalanawa, Par Yahagabim, Thawada Amun, La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ath, Yasha Ella. Imada upon you all Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Opening prayers. Barakatha Yahweh, Hagadol, Rachuam, Abiyah, Wanara'ah, Aliyawan, Malak, Shol, Shemayim, Wa'aratazah, Wako, Debarim, Chayayim, Wagum, Hamashiach, Mayahawa, Adawanawa, Ahabanawa, Hapalah, Yawaitazah, Yahweh Shai, Zakarnawa, Yahweh, Barataza 1, Imka, Yasha'Allah, Izanawa, Bana, Wasap, Yasha'Allah, O, Nanawa, Yum Yun, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Baba Kusha, Shalat, Mayaka'ala, Watazawadat, Alahayim, La, Maganawa, Rapanawa, Washamar, Alnawa, Ba'aikwo, Shalat, Haroka, Sho, Yahawashai, Lanawa, Lalamanawa, Rabium, Kakama, Tabawana, Wada'aith, Sho, Debarka, Bahasham, Yahushai, Thowada, Yad, Wa'iwalam, Aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth, and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahushai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably, your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel. Most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahushua to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahushua, thank you always and forever. So be it. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahushua that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, Asherah, Ethelanawa, Hathawara. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahushua that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, Asherah, Ethelanawa, Awar, Lara Awaf. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahushua that gives to us the rams who want to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, Asherah, Ethelanawa, Korun, Ha'ayol, La Korah, Ha'ain. Yeshabah. Be seated. Right. Shalom, shalom. Ashar Kanakah, happy feast of the dedication. This is the 8th night, the closing service, the 8th day when we come together on the last day to commemorate the celebration, the memorial of our deliverance from the hands of the Greeks by the power of the Most High, using certain individuals to be the vessels to help deliver us, right? This is now us coming back to understanding portions and pieces of our history that have been taken away. But now, through the Spirit, the Most High has given us the understanding in these last days to recognize who we are, our heritage, our culture, the holy days, all of these things that's now a part of us, right? And we now come here on this night to worship the Lord through a Sabbath service. We're going to go through the second half of the storyline that pertains to the Feast of the Dedication, which is the rededication of the altar and the temple that was desecrated, that was defiled by the Greeks at the times of their empire, the beginnings of their empire, right? Now, before we read this or jump into Second Maccabees, the 3rd and 4th chapters, I wanted to get somebody that didn't get me Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 27. Right? Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 27. Right? So this is Hayashar Kanas. Lord's will, everybody has had a festive week, a joyous occasion. I know for the majority of us, we're going through what they call the Arctic temperatures, right? We are in what they call in the Bible the mean season, where it's bitterly cold. Unfortunately, I had some instances where some of my family, they had their pipe burst in certain areas down in the south, not even up here in the north, but down in the south. Some of these things happen. So, we're trying to brace and weather the storm, as they say, but still in the midst of that, we have to be thankful and gracious that we are able to still come together and fellowship, whether it's physically here, whether it's on a live stream, whether it's on a teleconference for those that's dialing in, that we can still come together on this day, the final day, and break bread with the Most High spiritually, so that we can tap into that spirit, further our understanding, and as well as, you know, gain more wisdom that we can teach others and walk in this light. So somebody can get, does anybody get Nehemiah 9th chapter 27 verse?
I got it.
You got it? All right, if you could read that, Baba Kushah.
Nehemiah chapter 9:27 reads, Therefore thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies, who vexed them, and in the time of their trouble, when they cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and according to thy manifold mercies thou givest them saviors, who saved them out of the land of their enemies.
Out of the hand of their enemies. So the Most High at times would have us, through punishment, be part of captivity, slavery, some form of judgment, where the nations that are around us, you know, put us through some very harsh conditions. Sometimes we were just going through hard labor. Sometimes we was actually murdered or killed, right? And then over time, when Israel began to recognize the error in our ways, we then prayed to the Most High, added supplication, fasted, put on sackcloth, did all these things to humble ourselves before the Most High. And what the Most High did was he raised up saviors, plural, right, with an S. So when you go through the Bible, you'll see that there's many times when the Lord raised up a deliverer for us to come and help us out at that time in need, right? Wherever, you know, empires or generation was in at that time, the Lord raised up someone to do just that, right? So when you look at the books of the Judges, we had many saviors that was raised up during those periods of times. Here we in the Maccabees, and we're now specifically going into Mattathias, and now we're going to embark upon his son Judas Maccabees, as far as for what he's going to do, following the footsteps of his son. Right. So this is now the history and the storyline that we're going to read. Now, also, before we get into this, hopefully this works, because I haven't tried this on this laptop. I haven't done this before, but I made mention of this, I think, during the class this week. But let me see if this is going to work. Bear with me 1 second. I wanted to just play a quick video. It's not long. All right, let's see if this works. I know we was having some issues with the audio, so hopefully this is all right. Can y'all see that over there? Yeah. Let me see if I can. All right, so this was early this week when so-called President Zelensky from Ukraine came over to hold a press conference and try to solicit money from the U.S. But it's something I took from this press conference, because he's going to reference what we're reading right now in the scriptures, but it's going to be applying to the wrong people, right? So let's see if this is going to. All right. Now I don't think I could hit it from here. Wherever I was at, it allowed me. All right, here we go.
Justice for Russia's war crimes in Ukraine. Let me close with this. Tonight is the fourth night of Hanukkah, a time when Jewish people around the world, President Zelensky and many of the families among them, honor the timeless miracle of a small band of warriors fighting for their values and their freedom against a much larger foe, and how they endured and how they overcame. How the flame of faith, with only enough oil for one day, burned brightly for 8 days. A story of survival and resilience that reminds us that the coldest days of the year, that light will always prevail over darkness, and hope drives away despair. And that the human spirit is unconquerable as long as there are good people willing to do what is right. This year has brought so much needless suffering and loss to the Ukrainian people. But I want you to know, President Zelensky, I want you to know that all the people of Ukraine to know as well. The American people have been with you every step of the way, and we will stay with you. We will stay with you.
So what I wanted to bring out is to see how he tried to highlight, Hanukkah being in the same vein as what they're going through right now with the war that's going on with Russia, right? But the way in which he described it as it pertains to them, right, when it's put on their light, a small band of warriors that stood up against a great, opposing foe, right? Now, the words is right, but it's just applying to the wrong people, right? It's to the wrong people. Now, if that were us that were actually doing exactly what he said based on scripture, it would have a totally different spin. It'd be a different narrative that's being put out there right now. They wouldn't say a small band of warriors. We would be looked at as like the evilest of the most violent people that's out there. But when it now has a different image on it, it now, sounds great. And then he added at the end, the wives' tale about the oil that was burning for 8 days, because we don't read that in the actual Bible. We see that in other books. That's why we come to the scriptures. So now, based on what he just said, it was beautiful that this was something that Mattathias and the men tried to stop from happening, right? So we read this last week in First Maccabees chapter 2. Go back to First Maccabees chapter 2 and First Maccabees chapter 2, and I'm going to read from verse 44. And I'm going to stop at verse 48. First Maccabees 2 and 44. So it reads, it says, so they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor or for safety. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars, and what children soever they found within the coast of Israel, uncircumcised, those they circumcised valiantly. They pursued also after the proud men, and the work prospered in their hand. It says, so they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hand of kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph. And that's what this is. We're trying to recover the law out of the hand of the Gentiles, because the law is just not, thou shalt not eat swine's flesh. You got history, you got prophecies, you have a lot of things that's now encompassed in the law. So we now recognize that over time, when they took our law, they tried to change it up. They tried to change the narrative. They tried to change the look and feel of what it really is talking about, who they're really talking about, and embellishing and adding other things that's not there. So that's why we now have to come back and take our laws back, take it from the hands of the Gentiles, take it from these false narratives and these history books and these movies, and now give the real truth to the people that's out there.
And also you can tell that they're not going to say who the enemies are. And we know they were the Greeks, but they're not going to say specifically.
Exactly. Right. They won't go into detail and say that these were these people, because they are those people, right? That is a part of their heritage and their lineage. But it just sounds good when they have their face there. But now when it applies to us, that's, something that we need to forget about. We don't have to worry about that. We're all human beings, right? We're all one people. But when they're going through it, they're not all human beings. They're not all one people. They got to stand up and fight against their own brothers. And everybody should join in with them. That's why when we read this storyline here, and we'll see how even when we're actually doing what he's talking about, how all the other nations didn't come to our aid, right? They came to get slaves. They came to get servants while we were fighting for our lives, fighting for our laws, fighting for the temple. They said, we're going to get us some slaves out here. Why are they trying to do all of this? Thinking that because we're a small group of people fighting against so great a force that we wasn't going to win. So this is where, reading the scriptures, when we have a feast, it's a good thing that the Most High has these holy days on every season where we can try to break the spirit that's out there. Right now, it's so-called Christmas Eve. I know people is preparing and doing all this other stuff. And then tomorrow they're going to be, ripping up gifts and sending out text messages and all these other different things. But we have the right spirit here to counterbalance that, to counteract that, where we can now jump into what the Most High's real truth is, our history. When we was in the world, we didn't know anything about this history. so-called Christmas. Only thing we knew that it centered around the birth of Christ. We knew nothing about all of the rituals that we was doing, from mistletoes, Christmas tree, the date of December 25th, all these things we didn't know anything about, but we did it, right? We knew that there was lies about a guy flying through the doggone sky on a damn sled with Rudolph and all. We knew these things that was told to us, but we knew that this was all lies, but it just sounded good. It was all for the kids. It's all for the children. And that was what made it wrong. So now we're trying to write the story, write history in the right capacity. All right. So let's jump into First Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. All right. Now, as we getting into First Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, anybody can give us a quick rundown synopsis of what we went through last week in the first 2 chapters. It's like you get into the next episode and they kind of give you the quick rundown of what happened in the episode before, what happened prior to what we're about to read now, just to catch anybody who probably didn't read up or watch the link from before. Khan Nabiyah.
So right now we're in the time of the Greek Empire, their rise, and namely one of theirs that came out of one of Alexander's generals, Alexander the Fourth Epiphanes. He's the chief guy that's in power along with other people that are part of his cabinet. They're fighting against the Jews, especially in chapter 1. Some of us are siding with them, but then there's a remnant of them that are resisting them, led by a man named Mattathias, comes out of the sons of Aaron, and he made a stance against them, like similar to how Phinehas did, who was their ancestor from Aaron's grandson, Eleazar's son. And he's up in years, but now he and those like him have made a stance to resist the Greeks and their lifestyle, culture, mentality. They're trying to push on the Jews, and they're pretty much calling everybody that wants to fight with them to join their side. And in the end of chapter 2, he was old in years, so he left certain responsibilities to his sons to carry forth the mission.
Okay. Anybody else? Right. So we also read about how their culture was forced upon us. The Greek culture and customs was forced upon us as a nation. Not only us, but everybody, but us specifically, where they made it so that we could not keep the commandments of the Most High. And anyone that did keep the commandments of the Most High was put to death. So much so that the scriptures tell you that even if you called yourself a Jew, you was put to death, right? So everything was stripped away. And now because of that, you had those, as Kahan mentioned, that wanted to still keep these commandments, stay true to the Most High, stay true to the laws. They bound it together and they left the cities and then went up into the mountains, into the wilderness to still keep these laws because they couldn't keep it in the city anymore. So now, once we left the city, you had the Greeks who then came in and started defiling everything. One of the main things they did was to put a bastardized altar on top of our holy altar to now go and worship their false gods, right? Jupiter Olympus that you read about in 2 Maccabees, the 6th chapter, right? And they offered swine's flesh within the temple on top of the holy altar and defiled everything. Then they started having prostitutes and whores running through the circuits of the temple, doing all kind of whoredom. So everything was just out of disarray, I should say. And now we're trying to come back and restore order. And that's what Mattathias was doing with himself and those that were with him, along with his sons. And they began to prosper, right? And then it got to a point in time where Mattathias, he now had to transition. He himself was going to leave the earth and go back to the third heaven. And he set things in order with his sons so that they can continue on trying to fight the good faith, trying to fight the good fight in faith. So that's what we pick it up now in the 3rd chapter in 1 Maccabees to now continue on reading the history that led up to the holy day that we celebrate now of rededicating the altar. So this is 1 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter and the 1st verse. It says, then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, rose up in his stead. The his is talking about Mattathias, his father. After he passed, Judas now became the captain of the host. It says, and all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that held with his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. Right? So you'll see that this is also something that happened throughout history, where when you had someone who was the leader or the captain of the host, and once they left or departed, that someone else took their steed and everyone else rallied around them. Somebody get me Joshua chapter 1, verse 16. And everyone rallied around them. If you had someone who was a righteous man, a righteous individual, and now you had the next person that was coming up in line who was now like his apprentice or someone who was under him, the people would rally around him and then now go and support him. So now after Mattathias dies, Judas comes on the scene, and now Israel is beginning to now go and support him as if he is the same thing in the same spirit as Mattathias. So somebody give me that Joshua chapter 1 and verse 16.
Joshua 1 and verse 16. And they answered Joshua, saying, all that thou commandest us we will do, and whithersoever thou sendest us, we will go.
Right. So now Joshua is coming up after Moses. Don't sit down. Joshua is coming up after Moses. Right. Moses is the next. Joshua is the next one in line after Moses. After he dies, now he's being led or reared up to be the captain of the host of Israel, and all Israel now is rallying around him. Right. Read on.
Verse 17. According as we hearken unto Moses in all things, so will we hearken unto thee. Only the Lord thy God be with thee, as he was with Moses.
Right. So Godspeed. The same way he was with Moses, we're going to rally behind you and let the Most High also lead you. Keep on.
Verse 18. Whosoever he be that doth rebel against thy commandment, and will not hearken unto thy words in all that thou commandest him, he shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage.
So now Israel made an oath. They made a pact that everybody was going to support him to the point where if any man stood up and rebelled, that man was going to be put to death. That way you kind of weed out evil. You weed out dissension within the ranks. So when you make that oath, everyone says "Kun," then that's what it is. And if you see somebody who's now going against and speaking against Joshua, now they got to be dealt with, right? So that's how you dealt with a leader. A leader, if he was in the spirit of the Most High, everybody was going to rally around him. What is that in 1 Corinthians 11 and 1? Paul says, "Be ye followers of me as I am of Christ." So now the same way you would look at Christ, if Paul is following that spirit, you're going to deal with Paul just like that. Meaning you're going to listen to what Paul is saying. Not knowing, of course, you know Paul is a man that he has some sin in him, but Paul was a person who was now following after the instruction that Christ gave him. Same thing that Joshua was doing. Same thing that Maccabees, Judas is about to do now that we're going to read on throughout the scriptures, right? So let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 3. That was Joshua chapter 1, verse 16 to 18. So it says now in verse 2 again, "And all his brethren helped him, and so did all they that held with his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. So he gat his people great honor, and put a breastplate as a giant." So I put on a breastplate as a giant, "and girt his warlike harness about him, and he made battles, protecting the host with his sword. In his acts he was like a lion, and like a lion's whelp roaring for his prey." Right? So now Judas Maccabees, he made wars. He got into wars to defend the people. Right? And in certain situations, he had to take the initiative to go and now rid evil out of the land and rid evil out from the people. He was like a young lion that's ready to pounce on his prey, right? It says, "For he," verse 5, "pursued the wicked and sought them out, and burnt up those that vexed his people," right? Imagine that. We were just talking about this a while ago, as far as for one of the ways of dying is being burned. That has to be one of the most gruesome ways to die, right? Being burnt up alive, right? But Judas was burning people as a form of punishment because they was wicked, and they was now promoting this Greek custom within the nation. Verse 6, wherefore the wicked shrunk for fear of him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled, because salvation prospered in his hand. He grieved also many kings and made Jacob glad with his acts, and his memorial is blessed forever. Right? So we didn't really get into all the things that Judas did, but it's already giving you the precursor that this man was going to be so great that his memorial, his name, his fame now is blessed forever. Somebody get Ecclesiasticus chapter 41. Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha, chapter 41 and verse 13. This is what all of us want, are hoping, if we could stay consistent, if we stay fervent, that we also will have something of the like to happen to us, right?
Ecclesiastes chapter 41, verse 13. A good life hath but a few days, but a good name endure forever.
Right. A good life have but a few days. Like, and to this time, we'll say, you know what, being over, if you get to 70, that's a good life. After that, you got the cherry on the top. You exceeded what most think that they should live in these last days. But even in those short days, if you are a righteous man or a righteous woman, your name can endure forever. It can transcend time. That's how we're reading about Judas, right? That's how we read about Judith. That's how we read about Moses. That's how we read about Samson and all these other individuals who did great things valiantly for the nation of Israel. And now they're recorded in the book of the Most High, the book of life. And we're reading about them generations behind generations, right? So this is what it's talking about, that his memorial is blessed forever. Verse 8, it says, moreover, he went through the cities of Judah, destroying the ungodly out of them and turning away wrath from Israel. So now we were reading the same thing last week with his father Mattathias, that his father had to go within the nation, within the tribe, within Judah, within the cities to rule out our own people, right? If you jump back to 1 Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 44. 1 Maccabees 2 and 44, it says, so they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor, right? So that's what we're talking about. We speaking about even those that's within within our nation that they had to go and kill, that they had to go and deal with and punish because they were a cancer to the nation, right? So now Mattathias is picking up the baton and doing the same thing. All right, so let's go back. Verse 9 now. 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 9. It says, so that he was renowned unto the utmost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish, right? So it says he was renowned to the utmost parts of the earth, meaning the things that he was doing, the word began to spread about this band of warriors that's fighting against the allies of the Greeks, right? And everybody's now whispering, everybody's hearing about how they can't be stopped, how they can't be defeated. So he now began to get fame just on word of mouth. Then it says, and then other people began to start joining with him once they started to see that he had power with him, that he had the Most High with them. So people that ran away and fled to the heathen for succor, some of them probably came back and was like, yo, we didn't know that it was like this. We want to join forces with you. Or those who fled in other places in the wilderness, now they're coming out and they're banding together with Mattathias and his brothers and the Assyrians and the rest that were with him. Reading on, verse 10. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together and a great host out of Samaria to fight against Israel, which thing, when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him. And so he smote him and slew him. Many also fell down slain, but the rest fled, right? So specifically this one Apollonius, who was one of Seleucus, Antiochus Epiphanes, top men, he came to fight against Judas. And when he heard about it, he didn't run away or he didn't contemplate. He went straight forward, met him in the battle, and began to slay them. right? And some fell down slain. And once they started to see that they were not going to win, they fled, they ran, right? And that would become a theme with Judas and how he would begin to start putting the nations to flight, right?
I was gonna say too, we can equate that to our first independence, like Independence Day. It's because this was a great revolt against Hellenization, and then we ended up, winning, and they said, first Black Revolution was in Haiti, right? But this actually was our first Black Revolution, right? To say, what they did pushing against Hellenization.
Right. So you can say it's going to be, it's like our first, if you get that, that was me. It's like our first independence. We could say that this is our Thanksgiving, right? Because we're going to read that in the next chapter on how that's like our Thanksgiving. And we'll see that, these things were not associated to just everybody. It was very subjective, right? Their independence was not our independence. Their Thanksgiving is not our Thanksgiving. So we have our independence. We have our Thanksgiving found here in the scriptures, delivered to us by the Most High, right? So now let's continue on. It says I'm going to read that again in verse 11. Which thing when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him, and so he smote him and slew him. Many also fell down slain, but the rest fled. Wherefore Judas took their spoils and Apollonius' sword also, and therewith he fought all his life long, right? So that could be like one of those trivia questions, right? Whose sword did Judas Maccabeus, attain and fight with throughout his campaign until the day that he died? And then you would know that it'd be Apollonius's, right? He took the sword. Now it's almost similar to David, when after David fought Goliath, right? His sword, he didn't initially take it. He still had his own sword that he fought with after the fact. But when he was on a run and he went to the priest, he asked him if there was a sword there. When you read 1 Samuel, the 21st chapter, he asked him if there was a sword here. And he said, yeah, Goliath's sword is here, the one that you defeated, right? That's the only one that we got here. And he's like, I need that. And they gave him Goliath's sword, and then he went and used that afterward, right? I need that. I got to take that, right? So to take that sword, right? Well, that's why we have, the Most High, who gifts us with certain spirits, right? One of the spirits the Lord can gift you with is the spirit of might, right? Like he did with Samson, right? Where he can put upon you certain strength that you just probably wouldn't have in normal times, right? We read about David when he was fighting lions and things, defending against the sheep. And you say, come on now, how could he fight lions and bears and things like that? But Most High can give you the spirit, the strength to go and tackle a lion and kill him, go and tackle a bear and kill him, right? But where others, most will look at it as like, come on, that's impossible, because they don't understand the power and the spirit of the Most High, that he's going to give certain individuals certain gifts, certain talents to be able to prosper or to, do valiantly with in the times that they needed to be done, whether it's counsel, prophecy, right? Speaking in tongues, right? All these things come through the spirit of the Most High. So now reading on 1 Maccabees chapter 3, and now we at verse 13. It says, now when Saron, a prince of the army of Syria, heard say that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude and a company of the faithful to go out with him to war, he said, I will get me a name and honor in the kingdom, for I will go fight with Judas and them that are with him, who despises the king's commandment, right? So this guy said that he was going to go and get him a name and honor, right? Meaning that he wasn't doing it for goodness sake, or he wasn't ordered by the king. He wanted to just go fight against Judas just to get him some name, get him a fame, right? The scriptures speak against doing things like this, right? You even have this when you read later on in the Maccabees that you had some brothers of Israel that did exactly the same thing, but to their demise, right? Go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 25. Proverbs, chapter 25. and 27. So Proverbs 25 and 27 says, it is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search their own glory is not glory, right? So to go out and search for your own glory, right, is not real glory, because you're not doing it with good intentions. You're doing it because you're looking to get fame or to receive some type of adoration from people, instead of you doing something righteous for the people and letting that come on its own, right? So that's what this guy Sarah wanted to do. He wanted to go and get honor and a name for himself, right? He was vain, because that's all he was looking to do, is get himself puffed up. So now go back to 1 Maccabees 3 and 15 now. It says, so he made him ready to go up, and there went with him a mighty host of the ungodly to help him, and to be avenged of the children of Israel. And when he came near to the going up of Beth Horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who, when they saw the host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how shall we be able, being so few, to fight against so great a multitude and so strong, seeing we are ready to faint with fasting all this day, right? So the men that was with him got concerned and was like, it's a lot of them. How are we going to go fight against all them men, Judas? And we just came off fasting, right? We might not have enough strength to go and defeat these guys. I don't know if this is going to be wise to go and fight and go and engage in this conflict right now, right? Verse 18, unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few. And with the power of heaven, it is all one to deliver with a great multitude or a small company, right? So we got to understand what the Most High can do, whether it's 1 to 1,000, 100 to 50,000, whatever that may be, whether the number is great or large, or whether the number is small or feeble, the Most High can deliver a group or individual into their hands, right? The Most High can now allow them to fall into your hands. And the Lord has said this frequently throughout different periods of times as well. It says, for the victory of battle standeth not in the multitude of an host, but strength cometh from heaven. Doesn't come for us working out in the gym, right? We got the best weapons, we got laser beams and all kind of things on our weapons. They only got little, 6-shooter, but we got the such and such revolver. That's how we're going to win. No, that's not how it's going to be won with the Most High. Doesn't matter what kind of devices or equipment or advancements or technology or how many numbers you have. The Most High says, I can send down the angels and fight for you. I can just cause through a snap of a finger and they drop. We got to just put our trust and our faith in the Most High. Psalms chapter 32. Psalms chapter 32. And verse 16. Somebody can read that. Psalms chapter 32 and verse 16 to 22.
You said Psalms chapter 32?
Psalms chapter, 33. 33.
16?
And 16.
The face of the Lord is against them
You had
that do evil.
Psalms 33, 16.
Oh, that's 34.
Yeah.
There is no king saved by the multitude of a host.
Mm-hmm.
A mighty man is not delivered by much strength.
Although it may appear that way, the Lord said that's not how it happens, right? It's really done by him. Keep reading.
And horse is a vain thing for safety. neither shall he deliver any by his great strength.
Right. So you got horses, right? You may have a multitude of horses, and then you come in and you charge it. It may appear that that's what's going to protect you, right? Or you may have different devices, what they call horsepower, right? Different cars and planes and things of that nature that may have good engines that may be able to drive, people to doing certain things. But that's not what's going to protect you or give you safety or give you strength, power. Read on.
Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy.
Come on.
To deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine.
Right. So those who now fear him, the Most High is going to observe and watch and protect them. And in the face of adversity, the Most High will come and intervene. He will deliver you from, despair. He will deliver you from death. It's not going to be the weapons. It's going to be the Most High that's going to do that for you and then empower you to maybe be able to use certain vessels to defend yourself or to win the battle. But it all comes from the Lord. Read. 20.
Our soul waited for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name.
Mm-hmm.
Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us according as we hope in thee.
Right. So let the mercy of the Most High be upon us as we hope in thee. Right. So that's the same type of vibration that these men needed to be on, to let them know. That's why Judas was going back to that and letting them know that it's not about numbers, it's not about weapons, it's not about anything else but the Most High. And the Most High will come and deliver and fight for us if we put our trust in him. All right. So let's go back to 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 20. So this is 1 Maccabees 3 and 20. It says, they come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us, and our wives and children, and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. So they're fighting for vanity. They're fighting for sin and iniquity. But we're fighting for righteousness that pertains to the laws of the Most High and our lives. Verse 22, wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be ye not afraid of them. Now, as soon as he had left off speaking, he leaped suddenly upon them. And so Seron and his host was overthrown before them. So after he gave this speech to, encourage the men that they needed to, focus on the Most High, that the Most High would deliver, quick, fast, in a hurry, they turned and they went and engaged in a war, and they overthrew Seron and his host. It says in verse 24, and they pursued them from the going down of Beth Horon unto the plain, wherein were slain about 800 men of them, and the residue fled into the land of the Philistines. Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, and an exceeding great dread to fall upon the nations round about them. So now he was fighting these little small foes here and there, and he was winning those battles. But now when Apollonius came up, and then Seron came up, and it became like a back-to-back thing, now everybody was put on notice to say, yo, this guy, this nation, this group of people, they're not to be messed with. Their God is serious. They're being delivered and winning all of these different wars. How are they doing this? So everybody now is taking note of the nation of Israel. Verse 27. Salak, verse 26. Insomuch as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas. Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. So you can't have, people who are subject unto you talking about, a little old small nation over here, this Israel, and they winning all these wars. People like, yeah, you hear about these guys? These guys like won 9-10 wars. They done beat hundreds times more than who they were, right? So now it begins, you kind of take away take away the fame of the king and of that nation that the Greeks are now rising up, now people are starting to pay attention to Israel and Judas. And it's talking and clamoring about him. So he's getting a little bit mad. He said, you know what? I'm going to gather me up a force and I'm going to send them down there to go and destroy this people, right? It says, verse 28, he opened up his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. So they're on consignment, right? Whenever I need you, I'm going to call upon you. So I'm going to give you, silver and gold and riches for a year. And you can live out, until the time comes where you get that call. A cash advance. It's like somebody going to the job and is like, listen, I know I'm going to have to work for 2 weeks, 4 weeks first before I get my first paycheck because I got to work one in a hole. But can I get a paycheck early? Can I get paid like right now? I got some things I got to do, right? But in this case, it was just keeping them, on his string, because you don't want people to get either restless or somebody else come and do the same thing. And when you need them, you don't have them, right? So you got to solidify them now. So that's what he did. He says, I'm gonna get these guys paid for a whole year.
Like the reserves. Like here they have the reserves.
Right.
Call them anytime.
On standby. Right. It says in verse 29, nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land and taking away the laws which had been of old time. So now this is something that's interesting that you got to realize and understand what's going on, because it also reflects us today. Because what Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greeks did by taking away our laws not only affected us, but it affected everything, right? It brought a plague upon the land. So the things that was plenteous, the things that increased from crops and different things, and people was making trades and all that, that began to cease. Now, the things that you would normally have is not there, right? Because now a plague is in the land because the laws ain't being kept, right? The agriculture ain't going to grow. The animals is going to be feeble. So now when you fast forward and you look at today's time, look at what's going on. The whole earth is in all kind of sin. So now we sending out text messages about, hey, watch the chicken, watch your fish. So now the fish that we eat and the chicken that we eat, we questioning that. How the heck the legs get so big? Is that a real chicken? Why is the color of the fish like 4 different colors? What's going on here? Because there's a plague in the earth, because the laws ain't being kept. So this just didn't affect Israel. It affected them too, right? It was a trickle-down effect. So now we understand why the laws are important, why we now need to try to rehearse and try to do these laws for our benefit, because everybody's not going to benefit from this. Those who are keeping the commandments are going to benefit. The Most High's mercy is going to extend to them. But we see here, he had a problem because now those laws that was taken away now started to affect him, where he didn't have the amount of money or the treasures like he should have, because now the people in the land can't barter and trade and do the things that they would have because the plague is there.
Right. And another tactic that he did was trying to force his culture, doing cultural assimilation on the entire empire, because we're talking about the Seleucid dynasty versus the Ptolemaic dynasty. That's why he had to go to Ptolemaic to get money, because Ptolemaic, what they were doing, they were giving like grant lands to people, right? They give them grants to work the land, and also they gave them grain from their crops so that they can plant. And then in turn, people pay interest, and then he got money. That's how Ptolemaeus had money in his kingdom, because instead of conquering the people and force them to follow Greek customs, he merged into those people while he bring his people in, and also, to commingle with the local people. Whereas Seleucid pretty much going by force and try to enforce their culture on the local people, including us, and that's why it backfired and he didn't have money. Mm-hmm. He was focusing on forcing the people, not taking care of the land and agriculture and things like that. But he was pretty much forcing the people and forcing them to pay taxes, without have a proper plan to do it. And then we backfire on him, and we push back from his culture. We didn't accept it, so he got fired.
Right. And it's, you know, it's one of those things, especially in the land, because Israel is the Most High's favorite place, that when certain things like this happens and you bring in sin, it becomes a downfall. I mean, like when you look at the scriptures, when the Most High puts it in the law that the earth is supposed to have a rest of a year in the 7th year, right? That's law. The earth needs to be taken care of. So now when you remove that law from being done, it now makes the earth try to work overtime than what it's normally supposed to do. And then the earth is not going to be able to do its normal increase. So when we read in the scriptures back in the book of Judges, in the book of Joshua, when Joshua sent the spies out and they came back with, you know, a branch with one cluster of grape and how big it is. And you say to yourself, wow, how could grapes be that big? How could it, you know, that 2 men had to carry it? Well, that's what was going on when Israel began to, you know, when the earth was, you know, still in its infancy. Then over time, as sin began to multiply and things just began to just be taken away, the earth itself began to lose its power. The earth itself began to decrease because it's not being dealt with the right way. So now the Lord now brings us back into, you know, the fourfold. He brings us back into our kingdom. All of these things is now going to be done right. It's going to be like a re-energizing within the earth, right? The trees, the grass, the hills, all of them going to be within their own spirit. They're going to be screaming out and yelling and rejoicing that the rightful rulers and rightful leaders are in power to deal with us the right way, right? And the other nations as well, right? But right now, as we see, because of sin, dissension and plague has caused issues now within the region. So now, reading that again, verse 29, nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and plague, which he had brought upon the land in taking away the laws which have been of old time, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, for he had abounded above the kings that were before him, right? So when he first rose up to power, he excelled everybody, right? He had a lot of riches. But now when he did this to us and the plague started happening, now that began to dwindle, right? Started to decrease. So then it says, verse 37, wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money. Ain't that like what Esau like to do? When the time happens and they need more, what do? They're just going to go somewhere else and rob them somewhere else or tax them more to get more money so that they can go and do what they want to do, right? That's been their theme. That's been the MO. It's still happening today, right? It's not popularized that that's what's happening, but that's been their MO, right?
That was verse 31.
Oh, 30, yeah, 31. It's a lot.
And this cat just did it. Right in front of our faces, did the same thing. He came and got $45 billion.
Right.
Right.
Came and got $45 billion that's going to be printed. And, you know, it's like, where that come from? Where that money come from, right? Just came out of thin air. Like, heck, I think we should just go and say, hey, I need $1 billion. If it's that easy, right?
I said no Black Hispanic, you know, nation, you know, for us, we're not getting that kind of money. Not even Africa.
And we got all these homeless people on the street.
Right.
And he gave somebody $45 billion. That could put a hungry shelter.
Yep. But just like that, what is it? The documentary, End of Poverty. There was no design. It's like the war on drugs. There was really no war to end drugs. It was a facade. Same thing with poverty. There's no real, you know, desire to end poverty. They're making things. They're making certain countries be impoverished, right? That's how they lift themselves up. They don't have to pay it back. It's a gift. They didn't come and say, I need a loan. They came and got a gift. Yeah, you know, yeah, because you got to listen to what the narrative says. This is for, you know, the not only democracy, but for I forgot how Biden worded it, as far as for peace in the region, to fight against, you know, to keep peace, right? That's what this is. So you're trying to stop your other brothers from coming in and waging war and just disrupting everything. So we gotta be the global police and bring peace in the earth. So if that's what you need, then we'll give you the 45 billion. We gave you like 50 plus already, but we give you another 45 billion. It's like that. It's Christmas time, ain't it? Yeah. He came right before Christmas to get his gift, and then he bounced. He hopped back on that sled with Santa and then flew back to Ukraine, right?
And that's what Pelosi said. Like, he said, we got to come together because this has to do with defending democracy. It's almost the same thing that they doing right here, pushing Hellenization of the Greeks. So they go around countries and pushing democracy as the form of government that everybody should follow.
Right.
Right. And Russia is the communists. They oppose, what they try to push on Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they said. That's why they give them the money, because they want to preserve democracy, and they fighting for democracy. And Russia is not a democracy. And all around the world, they push democracy on every nation that they try to conquer.
Right.
Habakkuk 2 and 5.
Good.
What y'all talking about? Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 5. It reads, once again, Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 5. Yet also because he transgresseth my wife, he is a proud man. Now to keep it at home, who enlarges his desire is hell, and is as death and cannot be satisfied. To gather unto him all nations, and keep it unto him all people.
Sounds like him, don't it?
Mm-hmm.
The shoe fit.
So back in 1 Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 32 now. It says, so he left Lysias, a noble one, so like a noble man, and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates unto the borders of Egypt, and to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again. Right. So now he's going to go leave in Persia, but he got to leave, someone responsible to take care of the affairs while I go get more money and go and handle these Jews, go and handle Judas Maccabees and make sure that you keep my son, deal with him. I don't want to bring him with me. Just deal with him, give him some people to make sure everything is okay with him. And he's looking like this is easy. This is light work, right? It says, moreover, verse 34, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem. So all his affairs he put into his hands, right? Half of his forces he gave him. Handle all my affairs and also go and deal with Judah and Jerusalem, right? So that's why he left all of them there, because he had other things going on. Now, I always bring out that sometimes we don't care so much what these other nations is doing with other nations. This is not the book of the other nations. This is the book of the Jews. This is the book of the Hebrew Israelites. So it's going to give you the storyline from the perspective of what we had to deal with and what was going on with the Greek Empire. Sure, they were doing other things. You want to read about those other things that they was doing that really doesn't pertain to us? Go in those other books and if you desire to go do that. But what's in here is going to appertain to us, right? So it says in verse 35, to wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place, right? So they're trying to destroy us and root us out to take away our name from being ever even in existence, right? That's what their whole plot was at this time, to remove us from the face of the earth. And then later on, it says in verse 36, and that he should place strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot. And that's what happened now, right? You got strangers that's in our land, right? And they have been divided up by lot, right? You got Amalek that's over in the land. Then you got Ishmael that's over in the land. Now you have other nations that's over in the land as well, right? You watch the documentary on watching years ago in Israel. You have all different kind of nations that's in the land. Ethiopians that's in the land, the Armenians that's in the land. You got a lot of different people that's now trying to come in and claim rights or get a piece of the Holy Land, right? But it's the same thing where strangers are in the land, so much so that we now, the rightful owners, going back at least 70 years, we didn't even look to the land of Israel as being our land. We're thinking over in so-called Africa as our land. We're not thinking to the real Holy Land. Through the mercy of the Lord, now that information, that knowledge is coming out that we know that that's our land and that strangers are in the land just like they were looking to do back then. Verse 37. So the king took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year. And having passed the river Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Domenius, and Nicanor and Gorgias, mighty men of the king's friends, right? So these is men now who are, people who got themselves a name by certain things that they've done. Mighty men in fighting their own certain wars under the Greek banner, right? It says, and with them, he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah and to destroy it, as the king commanded. So they went forth with all their power and came and pitched by Emmaus in the plain country. And the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria and of the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them. So you got all of these nations that hearing that these guys is going to go and try to fight against the nation of Israel. They got a massive army. So on the optics, you would think that, yeah, they about to go and really take them out. We need somebody to help build our houses and till our land. Well, let's go get some more money, and we're going to go into the camp and now try to reserve us, some property, try to reserve us a slave, right? It started off by saying, and the merchants of the country, right? So you have merchants that was in the country, the same way that when you look at it in the last days, Yahushua said the same thing to John the Revelator, right? Go to Revelations, the 18th chapter. Same nations that was doing these things back then, same nations that's around today. Start at Revelation chapter 18 and verse 10. Revelations 18 and verse 10. Whoever gets that, they can read Baba Kushah.
Revelation 8, you said 18?
Revelations 18 and 10.
Revelation 18 verse 10. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is that judgment come.
Right. So when you read Psalms 137, you realize and understand that Babylon, the great city, is referencing the daughter of Babylon, who is Edom, who are the people who are ruling in the last days before Christ comes back. So when they're talking about this in the book of Revelations, they're talking about Edom. Again, read Psalms 137. I think you start at verse 7 to 8. It lets you know that Babylon that is speaking about here is the daughter of Babylon, which references Edom. This is prophesying their downfall. And the kings and merchants of the earth are the ones that's observing their downfall. Now watch this, read.
Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore.
Right. So now this is where you get trading from, like how you have Wall Street or the stock market. they're trading on the global market with all of these other nations, the kings and rulers of different commodities. So now the merchants of the earth back then are the same merchants of the earth today. These nations didn't die off, right? So now we're going to see what they've been exchanging. Read.
Verse 12, the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass, iron and marble.
Keep reading.
And cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men.
Right. So now it goes into all of the normal things that you would probably see that people will barter or trade with. And then it starts getting into things as beasts and sheep. Then it says horses and chariots. Chariots now back then were actual devices that you see with rolling around with 2, maybe 4 wheels. Now the chariots is going into tanks and different types of jets and fighter planes and helicopters and all these different things that they trade amongst with one another. You got the big contractors that now create these things and they trade with one another. Then it says, and slaves, right? So now you have men that also being taken and used for slavery, right? Some may call it like even sweatshops, like how these big corporations go to some of these third world countries and use the people and pay them pennies on a dollar to make billions of dollars. It's just another form of slavery. Then it says, and souls of men. So it's just not physical hardcore slavery. It's now the spirit, the mind, to put you in slavery in your mind, to now get you to follow something, seduce you through sorceries and witchcrafts, like we was talking about last night's class, to now follow a certain image, follow a certain doctrine, follow the beast, follow the whore and everything that she stands for, whether it's democracy, right? Whether it's Christianity, whether it's any of these things that's not in line with the Most High. That's what Babylon was pushing. That's what Babylon was the pinnacle of, to now allow all these things to happen. They were doing it back then, what we're reading here in the Maccabees. That's why these other merchants came to the Greeks. They say, hey, we want to purchase some things because that's what we do, right? So it hasn't changed, but it now has heightened itself to another level that we see that the Most High is going to overthrow, just like how we did Pharaoh.
And when you look at the nations, that's pretty much all what the nation is about. Everything is about commerce. And the scripture says it too, when it says, worry not what you shall drink. The nations, that's the thing that they cherish. That's what they look after. But ye seek the kingdom of the Most High first, and all these things shall be added unto you, right? And everything that, as far as things that we need. Not to say these things are bad, but that's what the nations look for. It's all about networking, financial networking, and that's pretty much what Seleucus was doing. Since his empire was large, and he was pretty much setting himself up in different cities so that he can have network to trade all throughout the empire extended to our people. So it's all about business, and like you said, that's pretty much what is being done now through financial network.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's go back to First Maccabees chapter 3 and verse 42.
Revelation 18, you said this is now. This is now.
What, Revelation 18?
Yeah.
No, I mean, when you read Babylon is fallen, when the merchants of the earth, they're seeing the actual fall of America, pretty much. Right.
What you said, it sounded like it was, you said this happened before. You're saying.
No. What I was referencing is because Babylon, Edom is the same thing here, right? They're the Greeks, right? They're the same people, but they were doing that same type thing where they were also buying and selling and bartering amongst their merchants back then. That's why the merchants were coming with silver and gold to buy of slaves. There's at times where they're not only just coming to buy of slaves, they're trying to buy of the same things that we was reading about in Revelations. But this was the one of the main ones because they wanted to get Jews to be slaves or servants after they thought that we were going to lose this war.
Right. So their system that they set up, whether it's democracy, whether it's communist, really has no compass as far as moral value. It's all about business. It's pretty much fair game. It's all business. You know, how to further our empire to make it more rich. So that's all it comes down.
Gabar.
Well, they just talking about buying us as slaves here. They're not talking about buying anything else.
Right, because that's what's important. The slaves is what's important.
Right.
Right.
We guys.
Right. I mean, we're not going. Yeah, because we're about to go to war.
They're about to lose.
And they're thinking that we about to lose. So it's like I said, if they go to war and we lose, then they're gonna have some slaves, right? So they ain't gonna kill everybody. That's what we read in our storyline. When we go to war with some people, we take sometimes the spoils, or we take handmaids, or we maybe take some servants to make them tributaries or whatever. So that's what they're thinking is about to happen, because they're a great empire at this time. The Greeks were the ruling empire. So why would you think that they're not going to win this war? Right.
No, but I ask you, were there any Romans in that Greek army fighting?
The Romans themselves, as we read along, I think we've been reading it already. Yeah. In the book of the Maccabees, as you read further along, they're going to be their own empire that's coming up, right? So they're separate. And then you're going to see that even Judas, as Judas begins to see how, with the Greeks, they were now forcing us to keep their customs and their laws, and they were very forceful. Whereas with the Romans, they at least allow some leverage where you can do certain things. You can keep your own laws as long as you now are under their authority. Hence, that's what we see that's happening in the New Testament when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when Christ is there on the scene and the rest of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, while the Romans are ruling, right? We were still able to keep our own laws, but under the Greeks, couldn't do that, right? You now could take away the law. You had to even take away that you was called a Jew. Hence, now over time, some of us, a portion of us as a people, that those names stuck when you were in Philippi, or you were in Corinth, or you were in here. You wasn't calling yourself by these names, Jew no more. I'm Benjamin, I'm this. You were saying, I'm a Corinthian. I'm a this, I'm a that. And you were following the laws of the land, because that became the thing as time went on. But for those of us that was in Israel, that was in Jerusalem, we still knew who we were, right? That's why when Paul wrote the letter, he wrote the letter to the what? The Hebrews, right? The Hebrews know that they were Hebrews. But those that was in Rome, those that was in Corinth, those that was in Philippi, they weren't calling themselves Hebrews. But Paul was sent to them to let them know that this is for them. Christ came and died for you too. We are about to get this kingdom if you get yourselves together and come back to the Most High and these laws, right? That was the message. So right now, they were separate, right? The Greeks was doing their thing and the Romans was on the come up. They were not there.
But they did know that they were of the heritage of the Jews, even though they were.
That who was of the heritage of the Romans?
These what do you call them? Gentiles who were really, the dumb Gentiles. They did know that they were Jews. They just was following those laws because they was in that other land. Right?
The actual Gentiles.
No.
Oh, our people who was in the Gentile state of mind.
Yeah, they just was uncircumcised, but they knew that they was Jews. In other words, we don't know we Jews.
Right.
They still knew they was Jews, but they call themselves Corinthians.
No, you can't, because you got to look at it, understanding how it works. Because even the people that's placed in the land right now, right? Let's say when you look at what happened in 1948, these people think that they're Jews and they're not Jews. You can't tell them that they're Esau. You can't tell them that they are something that they're not, because as generations go on, as time go on, that narrative begins to stick. That narrative becomes the rule. That's what you now know, because you're not so close to the actual knowledge of who you are as a people. By 3 and 4 generations, if you're not keeping your tradition, 3 and 4 generations, it's gone.
But they know they right.
I mean, based on, aesthetics, they'll know that they're not the same thing as East Indians or this, that. They'll know that they're different. But
Europeans, they know they're
right,
Europeans.
Right.
But again, a lot of them are confused. They believe it.
Exactly.
They believe that they actually Jews.
Yes, but they think they're European Jews, I'm saying. But they know that they're Europeans.
I mean,
No. Not to say that they're European Jews. They think that they're the Jews of the Bible. Right? You don't see European in here. That's not, they thinking that they from Abraham, they from Isaac, they from Jacob. That's why when we ask them, well, what tribe you come from? Oh, I'm from Levi. They start trying to find a tribe to fit in because they really don't know. They're not saying that, oh, well, this became that. They thinking that they're them people.
Right, and that's why they had to establish that that anti-Semitic thing. Because once they say you anti-Semitic or even question it, they don't have to show you any proof.
Right.
They don't have to go in the Bible show you anything.
Right.
Right. Once they say that, that's it.
Yeah.
They ain't gotta, show you anything.
Yeah. The anti-Semitic
to win the conversation.
or gain your sympathy from the Holocaust, then it's like, yeah, that was messed up. You know what? Let's just leave this conversation alone.
Right.
Like we got it.
To go with what you read in Revelation 18, you guys can write down Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, which was Old Babylon, not the Babylon of Revelation 18, but you see that it's similar to what happened to us in this Babylon. It says, in the third year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. Verse 2, and the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. 3, and the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and the king's seed, and of the princes, for children of whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge, understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans.
All right, so let's go back to First Maccabees chapter 3, and we at verse 42. It says, now when Judas and his brethren saw that miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them, they said one to another, let us restore the decayed estate of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together, that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. So now understanding that these men, this massive group is coming to fight against them, and the estate, when it looks at the land, the people, the temple, the laws, everything was languishing, right? So they said, listen, man, Judas said, we got to do something. We got to go and pray. We got to go ask for compassion. We got to fast. We got to do everything that we need to do in order to get the Most High's favor on our side so that we can go and win against the opposition in this war. Verse 45. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens or foreigners kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place. So when it says that it was like a wilderness, it wasn't like it was just barren. It was nothing there, meaning like we were not there. We were not prosperous. We were not doing the things that we needed to do and make Jerusalem prosperous. But the heathen was there. They're the ones that made it like a wilderness based on how they came with their sinful customs. So reading that last precept again, it says the heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Right. So you can imagine when you don't have Israel, especially Israel, in a good state, it probably looks like how Russia looks when we look on TV. It looked like dead. Even though you got millions of people there, there's no vibrance going on in certain areas where you don't have Israel. It's dead, right? There's no life really going on there. People working, people living, people eating, this, that, and the third. They got habitation, doing all this stuff. But as far as for a spirit, it's nothing there. So it's the same thing. Now, when they came in and built up their habitations within Jerusalem, it took a spirit away, right? It was like a wilderness that was there. Verse 46. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Maspha over against Jerusalem. For in Maspha was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel, right? So Maspha here is really Mizpah that you read about when you read in the book of Judges, right? You read about Mizpah and Joshua and Judges, but here it's Maspha when we went and prayed to the Lord aforetime. So this is where they're gathering together. Verse 47. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes, which was a custom that Israel did to humble themselves before the Most High, right? You took off all your, your goodly apparel and you put on sackcloth. You put ash on your head. Your hair was all done good. You got all good kind of oils and everything in there. No, you put ash on your head to say that stuff doesn't matter. My clothes don't matter. My look doesn't matter. Any of those things. Food don't matter. So you took away all the good things to humble yourself before the Most High. Verse 46. And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. And this is what we spoke about last week, that now when you read about them needing to recover the law. So now here it is, the Greeks now came and forced us to not keep our laws, to not keep the commandments of God. But when they got our laws, when they went into our temples and they got our records, they went to go start painting their faces in our laws, in our books, right? Why would they need to paint their face into something if they were already the people of God, right? Showing you that they didn't resemble the people of God. So they put their faces in there. That's why when you buy these modern Bibles that's in Borders or Barnes and Nobles, or you get it on Amazon and you look at some of the pictures that they have in there, it's their images, because they do the same thing again later on, right? They put their images in our records. So that's why it was important for us to come back to take hold of our records again. What is that scripture in Jude? I think it's Jude, to contend. We contend for the faith or something to that effect. Jude 3. So this is Jude 3, right? The book right before Revelations. This is Jude in the New Testament, the 3rd verse. It says, Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that ye should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. The saints is who? The children of Israel. This faith was given to our forefathers. We now have a job to contend for the faith. To say, listen, that's not you. That's not right. We shouldn't be celebrating that. We shouldn't be wearing that. Contend for the faith. Because if we don't, they're going to do exactly what they do. They're going to start bastardizing the Bibles, making different translations, saying what their interpretation of the book is, trying to remove the book altogether, giving you alternative doctrines and religions to go follow. So we got to contend. We got to fight for what's ours. Fight for our promises that's to come. All right. So that was Jude, the 3rd verse, the water.
That's what it makes you think of too. Like when we look at Esau as a nation and their hunter instinct going back to their forefathers, art imitating life, think about the Avatar. You see this in both the avatars, this whole idea of learn the native ways and customs, eating, like studying them on a genetic level, to then infiltrate and actually become like them, right, in order to subvert them. Mm-hmm. You see the second one kind of goes even deeper with it, as far as getting behind, enemy lines. You can see, and like they know, they're able to point them out, like, you guys are demons, you sky people, right? You're imposters. You look like us, but if you look close, you'll see differences, like even the 12 fingers. So I think the Navi, they got 3, whereas they have 4 fingers. And there's other ways that, about them, when they notice that they're not the same. And, this is like an old story, because they've done it throughout generations. Mm-hmm. Like, one could call it the Avatar, pretty much like a dance with wolves in space.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's always Esau coming in, learning the lifestyle culture of the natives, whether it's
Gad or Ammon overseas, whoever else, and they become the last of the Mohicans or the last samurai. It's just like, okay, here we go again. How many times are we gonna tell the story?
All right. All right. So now we're back in First Maccabees, first chapter 3 and verse 49 now. It says, they brought also the priest's garments and the first fruits and the tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up who had accomplished their days, meaning after their vows were completed, they got them to come also and join in and trying to rebuild and establish order within Israel, right? You can read about the Nazarites in Numbers chapter 6, when it talks about them accomplishing their days. Verse 50, then cried they with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, what shall we do with these, and whither shall we carry them away? For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profane, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest. How shall we be able to stand against them, except thou, O power, be our help? So this is the prayer that they now sending up to the Most High, so that he can take note and acknowledge and understand what's going on and come and give us an answer and help us, right? Verse 54, then sounded they with trumpets and cried with a loud voice. So we read about, the trumpets, during the memorial blowing of the trumpets, what's the significance behind the trumpets, during wartime, during feast days, on Sabbath days, so forth and so on, we blew up the trumpets. And now here it is, we're about to embark upon a war. So at the end of this prayer, they sounded the trumpets as well. Verse 55, and after this, Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands and over hundreds and over 50s and over 10s. So when you have a massive amount of a camp, you got to break up rank and have some form of order, right? So I think my wife asked me as far as, well, why we don't have captains over 10? I said, well, we don't have hundreds of thousands of people within our camp. When you have a large camp, then you have to break up order. This is what you read about in Exodus, the 18th chapter, right? 21st verse, when it goes into establishing order based on ranks that you're reading about here. So some of the larger camps, you'll see that they'll have these types of things set up. And that's according to the scriptures, right? Shouldn't be based on pride. It should just be based on order because of the volume that we have. Verse 56. But as for such as were building houses, or had betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return every man to his own house according to the law, right? You read about that in Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, verses 5 to 9. Right? That also establishes a spirit within the camp. Because now if you have these things going on where you're still building your house and you're leaving certain things undone, or you just was betrothed to a woman and you have not yet gone through and fulfilled your marriage of duty, right? Or you have land that you now need to go and cultivate and get established. If these things is on your mind, then you shouldn't be one going out to war. The Most High was, careful to understand the spirits in men, because now your whole heart might not be in this thing. Or if you got some men who's just fearful, right? Who's just afraid. We don't want someone who's afraid out there on the front lines, because that spirit could also matriculate within the camp. So in the law, in Deuteronomy 20, verses 5 on down, the Most High put it in there that if anyone has these type things going on, they got to go back. They got to go home. We only want those who are now free from all different types of obligations and can go out there and focus on the war. You see right now in Esau's army, that happened all the time. You got these 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old guys, and they get in there and they try to promote marriage, and they, soon as they now get someone, boop, within 2 months, they're going out to the war. And now here it is, he hasn't performed his duty of marriage to be with his woman, to kind of build the foundation, and all of a sudden she feels what? She feels that she's being alienated. She's left alone, right? And now what happens? Since she hasn't built that bond with her husband, she goes out there and starts cheating somebody else, right? See it all the time. They put it even in movies. Guys out there on the front lines in a war, and all of a sudden his wife sending them videos, you know, something of him, she's sleeping with somebody else just to get back at him because she's feeling mad at him because she left him home with the kids or left her home by herself. They put it in movies because that's the reality of what happens. But the Most High's law is perfect. The Most High thought of all this stuff. Y'all go back home, man. We about to go and take care of some things. It's not that y'all weak. We're not looking at y'all a certain way, but we just want to make sure everybody's in the right spirit. Verse 57. So the camp removed and pitched upon the south side of Emmaus. And Judas said, arm yourselves and be valiant men, and see that ye be in readiness against the morning, that ye may fight with these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people and our sanctuary, right? So you don't want to just give in. All of a sudden you start living amongst the nations. They start abusing you, right? They start doing all kind of things, and you got to see that, and you got to bear with. You don't want to deal with that, right? That's kind of why Saul, when he said, when he was in the war and he was fighting, he was like, yo, man, just kill me, because I don't want to fall into their hands. I don't want to see what they're going to do to us. I don't want my eyes to see it. I'd rather be dead in the spirit world at rest than to behold these types of things or have to endure these types of things. Even Mattathias, when he saw what was going on, he was like, woe is me that I had to live through this time, that I got to be above this generation to see the despair of my people. So he's like, look, man, we fighting for our lives and for our laws. It's better for us to go out in the bang than to, you know, kneel down and just accept any old thing, right? Because that's basically what some people would rather do, is just to kneel down and accept than to go out standing on their feet, defending your honor and defending your people, defending your law, defending the Most High, his name, right? We're not defending the Most High, but we defending his name, Yahweh's name, because they left their image upon us to now shine through to the nations. Verse 60. Nevertheless, as the will of God is in heaven, so let him do, right? That's part of the prayer that Yahweh gave, right? As it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to execute the Most High's will to the death if we have to, right?
To Kahan's point earlier, the Lord's Prayer speaks on the Most High providing, right? And the Gentiles seek after the carnal, the Most High just give it to us. We just put him first. That's the give us a day our daily bread, making an allusion or reference back even to the manna the Most High provided. And I think that was spiritual meaning behind it too. How we're blessed every day with that manna, so to speak.
Right. All right, so now let's get into chapter 4. Right, chapter 4, verse 1. It says, then Gorgias, I'm not sure how they pronounce his name, 5,000 took 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. So he had people that was in the towers within Jerusalem, within certain areas, who now they came and began to be their spies to try to let them or lead them to where Judas and the camp were, right? So Judas, we just read in the 3rd chapter, was preparing to go fight in the morning. But Gorgias says, nah, we're going to go in the night. We're going to take them by surprise when they're not really paying. They're not thinking that we're going to jump upon them or fight this war in the night. It says, Gorgias. It says in verse 3, now when Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, right? So he got word or wind of them that they trying to do a sneak attack. So Judas removed himself and the men, and then went and got themselves in another array that they can go and try to defend themselves against them. Verse 4, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp, in the mean season came, Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas, right? So we were just joking about this earlier when it says in the mean season. If you on the northeast, if you in the south, you now understand what it means to be in the mean season. Because it's mean out there as far as for the cold. Single digits. Feels like it's negative. Pipes bursting. I was at the spot getting some food for the feast, and it was a brother that was out there, and he was mad as I don't know what, because he stayed in an apartment, but the power, like, you know how the transformers and stuff be blowing out? So he was in his apartment, and all of a sudden he started seeing the stuff outside, like sparking, like whatever transformer thing or whatever was doing, but it only affected his apartment. Everybody else still had power and everything else, but he was like, nah, something got to be up. So he called in the power company, and they're like, yo, just turn your thing on and off, right? But he like, yo, it's not working. What am I going to do? It's the dead of winter, like literally the dead of winter in the mean season. When you stand out there for a good 15 minutes, you realize that anybody who's out there in the streets, is anybody homeless out in the streets? It's not good, man. That's hypothermia. That's a quick remedy for death, to stand out there. So when it's talking about the mean season, they're in the winter, right? This wasn't the spring. This wasn't the summer. This wasn't the fall. This was the winter time. Hence, while we are in the winter, keeping the feast of Hanukkah, or dedication, right? This was in the 9th month going into the 10th month, right? The 10th month going according to the calendar. We were talking about as far as how do you prove that we are in the winter season with this? That's for the Tuesday class. I'll let Kahan Nabiyah go into that. All right. Yeah. So, I'm just trying to give you an alley-oop, they say. So now it says in the 5th verse again, in the mean season came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas. And when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains. For said he, these fellows flee from us, because he got the word and then they bounced, right? They re-strategized. Verse 6, but as soon as it was day, Judas sown himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. So when the day broke, that was Judas's plan all along, to go fight this war starting in the morning. But now when the morning set up, they presented themselves, and now they're ready to engage. But then it says that they neither had armor nor swords to their minds. What does it mean when it said they neither had armor nor swords to their minds?
They had no guns and weapons.
They didn't have any guns or weapons? It says to their minds.
They just had their minds on God. They still had their guns and weapons.
They still had their guns and weapons, but they had their minds on the Most High?
I think when like Saul gave David the sword and stuff, and he says like he didn't know them.
Meaning what? You gotta explain to me.
Like he didn't, don't have use, didn't know how to use them or something like that. They didn't think about the fight or something.
They didn't know how to use.
How to use it.
They didn't know how to use the weapons that was given them.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
Okay.
Spiritual power.
Huh?
They didn't have any spiritual power.
They didn't have any spiritual power?
But they did have it, not did.
What?
They didn't have any physical.
Is that what you mean? It didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, you said they didn't have any.
It says in verse 6, the last precept, who nevertheless, these men that were with Judas, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. They didn't have any spiritual power. All right. So Gabar was most accurate in his assessment. It wasn't that they didn't have weapons, is that they didn't rely on these weapons to go and win this battle, right? Because as we're going to read on, we're going to see that they got weapons, but they didn't rely on them. Most people rely on things in order to win the battle. We just read before that the Most High is the one that's going to deliver us the battle. The Most High is the one that fights for us. So if you don't have the Most High with you, you can have all kind of weapons. That doesn't guarantee you victory, right? It's the Most High that will guarantee you. So as they're about to engage, they're thinking on what Judas had just, expounded upon about how great the Most High is, right? Go to 2 Maccabees. Go to 2 Maccabees, chapter 8. 2 Maccabees chapter 8 and verse, I'm going to start at 16. All right, so 2 Maccabees chapter 8 and 16, it says, so Maccabeus called his men together unto the number of 6,000 and exhorted them not to be stricken with terror of the enemy, nor to fear the great multitude of the heathen who came wrongfully against them, but to fight manfully, and to set before their eyes the injury that had unjustly done to the holy place, and the cruel handling of the city, whereof they made it a mockery, and also the taking away of the government of their forefathers. So he's reminding them about everything that the heathens did to try to make them stir up some anger, stir up some hurt of what had transpired already based on what the heathens had done. Verse 18, for they, said he, trust in their weapons and boldness, they being the heathen. But our confidence is in the Almighty God, who at a beck can cast down both them that come against us and also all the world, right? So when at a beck, at a word, at a snap of a finger, a bat of an eye, the Most High can destroy everything if he chooses to. That's who we rely on. They rely on devices. They rely on enchantments. They rely on Satan. They rely on all these things, but we have the Most High. So it's not so much the weapons, but it's the Most High that's going to deliver this battle for us. All right. So now let's go back to 1 Maccabees 4 and 7. So 1 Maccabees 4 and 7, it says, and they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed and compassed round about with horsemen, and these were expert of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither ye be afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. So you'll see that sometimes, you know, things that were great events and deliverances for us, some of the prophets, some of the righteous men will refer back to that, right? Where we were just reading in 2 Maccabees, the 8th chapter, after that 16th verse, they go back to times of Sennacherib, when the Most High delivered those enemies, and he actually sent the angels to go and kill them off, that Israel didn't have to lift a finger or a sword. So we got to remember that how the Most High dried up the Red Sea with the Egyptians in it, to the point today that it's still a testimony, meaning that people can now see the relics at the bottom of the Red Sea today of what the Lord did aforetime, or go into the museum in Cairo, Egypt, and see the things that they recovered and placed on display. So we got to remember what the Most High has done and what the Lord can still do or will do for us in the times to come.
Right, and also to put a perspective on it, some might say, if that's the case, then I don't have to do anything. All I gotta do is pray, and the Most High will just deliver. I ain't gotta do nothing. So what's the point of a soldier, right? Why a soldier gotta train himself? So what's the point? The point is, you still gotta practice your skills. You still gotta study to show yourself a fool, but you gotta do it in a way where, when the Most High is ready to use you, then he's gonna use you and use your capacity and your skill that he gave you. But don't do it for the sake of you think that's the skill that's gonna deliver you. That's not how it works. You still practice. You still go to the whatever you do, whatever gift the Most High gives you. Practice it, but don't believe that the gift is what's gonna deliver you in the day. Always know that the Most High gonna use you in the right time at the right moment to use your gift, so that you can win the battle. But don't put it all on your skills, thinking it's your skills that's gonna win. But you still gotta practice. You still gotta go do what you do. You can't just stay there and then I pray and then I do nothing. That's not how it works.
Right. Scripture telling you in James, faith without works is dead. Yep. You just can't believe. You got to put forth works. Right. You got to do some things to prove to the Most High that we are worthy for the deliverance, that we are worthy for the blessings, that we are worthy for those spirits and things that he can bestow upon an individual. You just can't be lazy and thinking that I ain't got to do nothing and just going to get everything. No, right? Even these men, Judas, Joshua, right? A lot of these men, they knew about the Most High and they still went out there and did the work, right? They could have just stood there and say, nah, we ain't gonna need to do nothing. We just pray and just stand here. Most High gonna do it all. No, they had to go out and fight, right? And then the Lord delivered them into their hands, by their hands, right? So now reading on verse 10. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before our face this day, that so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivereth and saveth Israel, right? So that's the key, that we want to get a name for us and for the Most High by standing true and firm with him, and then everybody will be put on notice to say, listen, we can't mess with Israel, nor should we mess with their God. That's the key. Verse 12. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets, right? Which we know is a part of the law when it comes to one of the purposes for the trumpets. The Lord says that when we go to war, we sound the trumpet, sound the alarm, and the Most High will come and deliver us, right? So that's something that we always, sometimes we see the reference points in the scriptures where the Lord allows a testimony to be placed there that the children of Israel sounded their trumpets before they engaged in war, right? Dakazak.
As substantiated what you said earlier, archaeologists have discovered Pharaoh's chariot and bowls of horses inland under the Red Sea.
Exactly. Right. Forgot. I gotta see if I still have that document where yeah, it actually should be. That one you can make a montage of certain archaeological things that have been discovered, where you got the Noah's Ark, because they have things about that, and then certain things within the land of Israel that have also been cultivated or excavated to now show that some of these records is real. Put the Moabite stone on there if you choose to. So yeah, we can put that there so that when people read the scriptures and they think that says stories, no, these is actual events that happen, and the archaeologists and the people who now go out there and historians can validate it and say, you know what, the Bible is true. Khan Nabiyad and Gabar.
Sutherland's history videos that he has like a short brief mention of these two, I guess, scholars, what have you, Fletcher and Dallas. Now, both of them pretty much reported about the sky being dark and not being sure why around the same time of Christ's crucifixion. I was like, oh, in the Bible is fantasy. What about these guys? These guys just take a note of any person would. Took note of that.
Right.
Mention other weird things too.
Okay. Gabar?
The Moabite stone, that's in the Bible?
No, the Moabite stone, what the Moabite stone does is Moab's account of the times that we read about in the Bible, but it's from their perspective. It mentions Misha the king, and then it goes into, it even names our God on their stone, right? Because they defeated us at one point. So they recorded it in their records, and it was now brought forth on this stone about what they did to the nation of Israel. So what that does is it lets us know that this is now also brought, stretched forth, it has its own tentacles in the other nation's record. So it's just not our own, people like to say this is a made up storyline. Well, now if you got a whole nother people with a whole nother history and their own record about what they did during the same time to us as a people that corroborates what you read in the Bible, then it's like, what can you say? Right? This is not just something made up, because they got it also in their records about the same things. So that makes it become a little bit more difficult for the non-believers to now try to find some flaw, right? Because there is no flaw. All right. So now let's continue on. First Maccabees 4:14. It says, so they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomforted, fled into the plain. Howbeit, all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword. So those who couldn't run, who couldn't run fast, they was the ones that was getting it, right? When they seen them coming, they was, they're like, yo, we gotta run. They're getting a slice in the back, and they falling down, dying right there, because, you know, the Lord was with us at that time. Right, I think it's somebody when they say, "Yo, I ain't got to be the fastest one, but I just got to be faster than you."
Reminds me too, the scene in 300, they were doing that battle at the Hell's Gate, and the guy, he said, the Persians in the back were crying forward, Persians in the front were crying back, and the guy just stands and he's trying to run. Already taking life.
Gun. So verse 15 again, it says, howbeit all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gassera, and unto the plains of Idumea, and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there were slain of them upon 3,000 men. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them. So after he got the hindmost of them slain, about 3,000, and they fled into all these other different areas, they stopped, and then they returned and came back, right? It says in verse 17, and said to the people, be not greedy of spoils, inasmuch as there is a battle before us. So don't get comfortable. Don't try to go out there and start, grabbing up things and you taking them for possession. You about to go, take it back home and no. We still in a situation here. We still in the conflict. We got to be ready, because they can, realign themselves and come back. Verse 18, and Gorgias and his hosts are here by us in the mountain, but stand ye now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoils. So let's make sure the fight is done, and after it's all taken care of, then y'all can come back and just wreak havoc and take as much as y'all want from these heathen. Verse 19, and as Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain. So as he's talking, they coming out and seeing, if Judas and them still there, what they looking to do? Are they looking to flee, or are they just gonna try to charge it? So they looking and seeing them there. It's like, yo, man, I don't know what we're gonna do. All right, this don't look too good. This is verse 18. I'm sorry, verse 19. I'm gonna read right 19 again. And as Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. Right, so it didn't look good. Right, their tents and the places of their habitation was now all being burnt up. It was on fire. So they're like, yo, what else are they gonna do? Right, verse 21. It says, when therefore they perceived these things, they were so afraid. And seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled everyone into the land of the strangers. So they said, this is not our time, man. We just need to retreat. Let's fall back, right? These guys are still looking like they 10 times taller than what they are, man. We can't win this. So everybody bounced, right? So then it says verse 23, then Judas returned to spoil the tents, where they got much gold and silver, blue silk and purple of the sea, and great riches. So they went back to where, this army had their camp, right? They had all of their great things, and they was, living comfortably as they went to go get the war. So now they left all these stuff after they fled, and they went to spoil them and took all of their treasures. Verse 24. And after this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving. So this is thanksgiving, when your enemy is delivered into your hand, right? That's what they went and sang, a song of thanksgiving. Now, last month, the heathen did the same thing. They sang a song or kept a feast in honor of thanksgiving because we were delivered into their hands, right? It wasn't something for everybody to just, now feast in and partake in, because it really had nothing to do with us. It was our Holocaust, so to speak. It was our massacring of our people within our tribes. This now is us doing that to them because they tried to come against us, right? We didn't really go on an assault here. This was them trying to come against us and us defending ourselves. So again, it says in verse 24, after this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised Yahweh in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Psalm 134, right? That whole psalm speaks about how his mercy is everlasting. It endures forever, even up until today's time, and then some to come. Verse 25, thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Esaias what had happened. Well, yeah, 136. No, I say 134. Yeah, come. Psalm 136, Salakia. Not 134, 136. For his mercy endureth forever. That whole psalm. So reading again, verse 26. Now all the strangers that had escaped came and told Esaias what had happened, who, when he had heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done unto Israel, nor such things as the king commanded him would come to pass. So he was left, you know how they say, you had one job to do. You had one job to do, and you didn't do that. You didn't fulfill it. So now he's concerned, right? Because, you know, Antiochus is going to be coming back soon. So now they got to try to come up with a plan to try to execute what was laid upon him. Verse 28, the next year, therefore, following, Lysias gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So it wasn't something that he did right then and there. He came back the next year. So it took him time to go recalibrate, you know, speak to people, re-energize them, come up with a strategy and a plan that now he's going to come back and fight against Judas, right? It says in verse 29, so they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. So we see his numbers is increasing, right? Because before it was in the hundreds. Now he got 10,000 men with them, right? So now you got more people who was coming out of the woodworks who probably fled because they were afraid. And now they're seeing what's going on. And now they're ready to join forces and now go and defend our nation. It says in verse 30, and when he saw that mighty army, he prayed and said, blessed art thou, O Savior of Israel, who didst quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hands of Jonathan, the son of Saul, his armor bearer, right? So this is what we was reading in the book of Samuel, right? The times of David and also Jonathan. When David went and defeated the Goliath and the Philistines, and then also Jonathan went with his army to go and defeat the Philistines and the Hamites. So he's referencing that. Verse 31, shut up this army in the hand of thy people Israel, and let them be confounded in their power and horsemen. Make them to be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fail or to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction, right? So the Most High can put a spirit in the nations where they don't even want to fight, right? Get Deuteronomy chapter 2. Deuteronomy chapter 2. And verse 25. So Deuteronomy 2 and 25 says, this day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. Meaning that they would have no might to want to come fight against you, right? That's what Rahab the harlot told Joshua, his spies, when they came to spy the land. She said, listen, we heard about you and your God. And most of these men here, they trembling. They afraid. So that's what can happen. The Lord can put a spirit of fear in the nations before they even come fight against you.
Second Ezra 13 and 8. And after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together to subdue him were so afraid, and yet durst fight.
Mm-hmm. That's why we just read, when you're reading the law in Deuteronomy 20, if you're afraid, you're not in the army, you're going home. You got to go, right? Because that spirit is going to rub off.
What did you just read?
Deuteronomy 2:25.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
2:25.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis. Genesis chapter 35 and verse 5. It reads, and they is Jacob and his family, journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, that they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob.
Can you read Joshua 5 and 1 also, Baba Kushan?
It's funny because that was right after the situation with the Simeon and Levi against Shechem.
Mm-hmm.
So thank the Most High for that assist, right?
Joshua 5 and 1.
Joshua 5 and 1, and it came to pass when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that Yahweh had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was there spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel.
Right. No spirit in them because of us. Right? Melted. They were afraid. They wouldn't want to fight against us.
Proverbs 21 and 1. It reads, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whatsoever he will.
Right. So the Most High can cause your spirit to be full of might, courage, or he can change it to you're feeble, right? No courage at all. Afraid, fearful, right? So now back in 1 Maccabees chapter 4.
Boxing. That was like half the strategy, right? For Mike Tyson, Iron Mike Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
You even talk about that too, you know, as far as inspiring fear and dread in an enemy, to where you got plenty of boxers that actually train, or actually equipped to handle them. Because of that fear you put in them, just from the jump, you know, they would lose.
Mm-hmm.
You would see them in the first round, just like shook my mouth deep. Mike Tyson.
Yeah, you see, when he used to fight, it was funny. You know, he won a lot of fights early. He used to fight like 10 fights in a year, like every other month or something like that. Now you get a guy fight once a year. But you know, when you watch certain boxers, I watch boxing, and just their entrance to get to the ring. You know, these guys, they got rappers, they got singers, and they taking all the time, they doing all this. Mike didn't do that. Mike got a towel on, he was coming straight to the ring. His walk was just intimidating. And he said in an interview that was his thing. Like he said he can tell just before they even came to do the little, read the rules and they bringing them together. He's like, I can tell this guy's already afraid. But all of that was, calculated. Right? He just comes with his black shoes on, no socks. He just coming, and it intimidated people, and they got fearful, and they didn't have the courage.
In one instance, he was punching a hole in the wall, man. He punched a hole in the wall, and the guy was like, "Oh shoot, he's punching holes in the wall," and he was afraid.
Yeah.
At least until
Mhm.
everyone said, wow.
No, Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So now back at verse 33, it says, cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So where it's worded, he says the Most High is the one that's going to deliver the battle, but he says, win this battle for us by our hand. That's why it says, cast them down with the sword of them that love thee. Who is the them? Israel. With our swords, Most High, go and win this battle. Right? Verse 34. So they joined battle, and there were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them were they slain. Now, when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas's soldiers, and how they were ready to either live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again unto Judea. So they had to regroup again, right? He was like, look, man, these guys, they're not like our guys, because you got people who in the military or who in the armies, they want to go and come home. That's all they want to do. They just don't know. They just want to get to what they need to get to, finish the mission, and come back home. Israel is like, look, if we're going to die here, we're going to die here. It's hard to fight against a people who is willing to die for their cause. When you're not, most of these nations, most of these people that's in these armies, they're not willing and ready to die for a cause, especially the cause that they don't trust in, right? Because the reasons why sometimes they go out to war is all politically. It's all about taking advantage and stealing and doing this from other people, and some of these people who are of the other nations, because this like their armies are mixed breed anyway of different people. So it's difficult for them to want to everyone collectively be all in on every mission, every objective that's out there. I know firsthand that people are like, listen, I don't want to go over here. I don't want to go do that. I don't want to go to Afghanistan. I don't want to go here because I know it's a sham. So now when you're going out there fighting, you're not really going out like the fight. You just want to yo, man, how long we got here? Did y'all get all what y'all got to get? Because we got to get out of here, man. I don't want to be here for much longer. Right? I'm being facetious, but that's what they're saying. Is saying that, look, they ready to die for what they fighting for. We can't fight against. We're not ready for this yet. So he had to go regroup again.
Remember in Pearl Harbor, yeah, the pilots, certain fighter pilots, they would just dive right, flat right into the ships.
Mm-hmm.
And even Ishmael or that kid, they'll just blow themselves up.
Okay. Yeah.
Kamikaze. It's like, oh snap, they're flying right into the ship. It's not like they're flying, man. They're flying boom, right.
Oscar Mayer Brigade, boom. As the body used to say, Oscar Mayer Brigade, boom.
Oh man. All right. So we had verse 36.
Wow.
It said, then said Judas and his brethren, behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and to dedicate the sanctuary. Right. So now after Lysias failed again, they got, defeated, and they had to go back amongst the nations to then recalibrate and come back. Now they took the opportunity to say, hey, we're going to go and cleanse the sanctuary, right? Go and take out all the defiled things that they had going on there, and then now make it better than what it was before, right? So now, give me 1 second here. I was looking to find think it's in 11, but I'll come back to it. Because there was a part in the prophecy in Daniel's, the 8th chapter, that speaks about them coming and cleansing the sanctuary. Right? I was trying to go back to what is it? Lost the precept, but it'll come back to me. So then read it on in verse 37. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into the Mount Sion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profane and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains. That's what happens when you don't take care of the land. Like you start seeing like a person or people who leave, their property for like long periods of time, and months, a year go by, and you come back, you start seeing grass growing up from the concrete buckling up and all of that. That's what was going on with the sanctuary. That's what was going on with the courts, because people wasn't tilling the land or taking care of the area. Verse 38 again. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profane and the gates burned up and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made a great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried toward heaven. Because we recognize that these things was holy for us, holy to the Most High, because they were dedicated already aforetime. The Most High gave us the instructions on how to create this environment so that we can worship him. And now we come back and we see it in a decayed state, which now was reflective of us as a nation of people. So now that's why they were so remorseful and fell down flat on their faces. They say, Dad, I can't believe that we come to this. Our holy vessels and our temple and everything is just, look at this, man. Verse 41, then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he cleansed the sanctuary. So even though Lysias had his forces in the country, it didn't stop that there were still other heathens within the cities, right? So he said, listen, you 100, you 200, whatever, y'all go and deal with those guys over there, right? Make sure that they don't cause any havoc. Get them out, deal with them, whatever, while we go take care of the affairs of the temple. Remember, Judas Maccabees and them are all Levites. So this is something that now is very near and dear to them as a tribe, because they're the ones that's joined to the Most High to perform these services. Verse 42. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law. Not somebody who, was forced or, this wasn't their thing. You got some Israelites, some Levites who have pleasure in going into every aspect and execution of the law. Blameless, that no one can say anything wrongful or very sinful, outrageous about those men. Those men are the ones that was great for the job, right? They were going to be the ones that was going to be up for the task. Verse 43, who cleansed the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place, right? So when it's talking about cleansing the sanctuary, it ain't talking about going getting that spray bottle and just going and you spraying it and you just doing that, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we done Listerine, Mr. Clean, and we done everything and everything is good, right? No. No, that's why I said when you think about cleansing the temple, it's just not you. Somebody say, go clean the kitchen. That's what you're going to do. You're going to get something and you're going to start spraying and wiping and doing everything else until everything smells nice. You don't see no grease no more here and there, and it's clean. That's not this, right? Sure that they probably had all kind of filth and stuff all over the place they had to clean up, but cleansing also it pertains to how things needed to be done according to the law, as we're going to read, right? Certain things had to be done a certain way. If it wasn't done a certain way, then it was not clean. It was not clean, a clean thing, a clean vessel, a holy vessel unto the Most High in the sanctuary.
Is that the verse we always use in Job 14:4? Can a clean thing come out of unclean? No, not one.
Right.
Where it's talking about practices.
Right. So now watch this as we get into it. Verse 43 again, who cleanse the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place. So now you had certain stones that was already in the temple, that was clean, that was holy at one point. But when the Greeks came in and they started doing their sacrifices and they put in their altars and they had all things going on, they said, yo, these stones are now defiled. They could have took the cleansing agent and said, you know, we're just going to clean it up, shine it up. But they said, nah, it's spiritually defiled. We got to get these stones up out of the temple and then go and get new stones to bring in here, right? Yahukanan.
Yeah, Leviticus chapter 11, verse 35. And everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven or ranges for pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean and shall be unclean unto you.
Right.
So, because, you know, like ovens and pots, they absorb, you know, certain chemicals from other unclean food and things like that. The Most I said, just get rid of all of that. Just get rid of it.
Right. And that's why they had to chose. That's why they chose certain blameless men who had delight and pleasure in the law. Because if you just show somebody who didn't know the specifics of the law, they wouldn't execute it the right way. Leviticus 11. So they would have just done certain things, just, you know, what they thought was best to do. But now you had to get somebody in there who understood to what Yahukanan's reading and the rest of the law pertaining to all aspects of how to bring in holy and clean vessels and to cleanse the sanctuary as a whole. That's what these men had the task of doing. Verse 44. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. So now the old stones, they took and put it in the mountain. They didn't want to just get rid of it and destroy it. So they said, we're going to leave it up there for a time. We'll let a prophet come and be a seer unto us. The Most High, maybe at some point later on, may give him the vision or the instruction of what we should do with those stones. Right now, we don't know. We don't want to go do something that we shouldn't be doing. So let's just put that over there, but we're going to get some new clean stones and bring them in here and then dedicate it with the whole sanctuary. Verse 47. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, right? So you read about the altar and this creation in the stones. You read Exodus chapter 20, verse 25 on. Let me make sure. Let me see. Exodus chapter 20. Right. Verses 25 to 26. Again, that's Exodus chapter 20, verse 25 to 26. And then also Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 5 to 6, which kind of goes into the same things as it pertains to the altar and the stones that were associated to the altar. Khan, you can read them. Say again? I couldn't hear the last part. Oh, Exodus chapter 20, verses 25 and 26. And then Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 5 and 6.
This is Exodus 20 and 25. And thou will make, Exodus chapter 20, verse 25, and thou will make an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. But thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou shalt remove it. 26, now thou shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon.
Right. All right. And then Deuteronomy 27.
Deuteronomy 27, 5 and 6. And there shalt thou build an altar unto Yahweh thy power, an altar of stones. Thou shalt not lift up any iron tool upon them.
Right. So you can't chisel, you can't do anything to alter the stone. It has to be in its natural state. Read.
thou shalt build the altar of Yahweh thy power with cold stone, and thou shalt offer burnt offerings thereon unto Yahweh thy power.
Gun. So that's what they were doing according to laying up the stones in the mountain and then now bringing in new whole stones according to the law, right? So now back in First Maccabees 4:48, it says, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were there that were within the temple and hollow courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. So here it says, and they brought the candlestick, right? So everything was defiled, right? So now we got to look and see, well, where did this whole storyline come from of the oil with the only had enough to burn, you know, one oil for one day, but it burned for 8 days. They going out and they getting all the resources and things that they need in order to now rededicate the temple. They brought in a whole new candlestick because the other one was defiled, but they built it according to the law, just like we read about the altar. So this 9-stick candlestick ain't according to the law. We went and showed that last week as it pertains to the Ark of Titus that's over there in Rome and Italy. How they show the Romans left their own archaeology to show that they took a 7-candlestick menorah out of Jerusalem during the time of our destruction in 70 AD. Right? So this thing that they doing, it's a lie. What Biden was talking about, it's a sham, right? Some made up stuff, right? So it says here in verse, what verse was that? 48? Right, we're in 50 now. And upon the altar they burnt incense, and the lamp that were upon the candlesticks they lighted, and that they might give light in the temple. So there it is. They didn't say, oh, they ain't have enough light. They burnt the candle, they burnt the lamps on the menorah so they could light up the sanctuary that was there. Verse 51. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning. So now when we go back to First Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 51. I'm sorry, verse 54. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 54. It says, now the 15th day of the month Caslu in the 145th year, right? That's when they went and did what they did. And then when you jump down to verse 59, now the 25th day of the month, right? In the 145th year, 145th year. Now, when we reading here in First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, it says in the 148th year. So 3 years went by, and on the very same day that they defiled the altar, 3 years later, we rededicated the altar. So all this that transpired that we're reading in First Maccabees chapters 2, 3, and all up to 4 was a span of 3 years to the day, right? That's what we're reading. 3 years to the day, and then we were able to now reclaim the temple and rededicate it back to the Lord. So I'll read verse 52 again.
So 3 years between all that time, so the temple was just left for like 3 years, right?
No, not that was just left because of they defiled it. The day, the first, that 145th year, that's when they was defiling it, right? Okay. That's when they was defiling it. Now here, when Judas and his armies are now making their offenses, they are able to now push the armies of the heathens away to now be able to go and reclaim the temple and rededicate it.
Oh, that's why all those things were growing and all the weeds and all that stuff.
Exactly. because they didn't care about our temple the way we cared about our temple. They went in and did what they did, set up their false gods in the temple. That's another part of the cleansing, because they set up the god Jupiter Olympus in the temple. Right? We got to get all that stuff out of there and then began to rededicate the righteous holy vessels to the Lord. And that happened. All of that transpired within 3 years for us to do what we're reading right now. So now back in 1 Maccabees 4 and verse 53. And offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs, citherns, and harps and cymbals. So they even mentioned it here. Look at what day they did this several years ago, and look at now. We got the opportunity to come back and sing to the Lord and play good music in honor of the victory that the Most High has given us. Verse 55. Then all the people fell on their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. So in Jeremiah, the 10th chapter, when we getting on our people for them decorating with silver and gold on the tree, in our history, we was decorating with gold and silver on the temple, not a tree, but the temple, right? So his spirit has it where we're in the same day, right? At evening begins the day. So in the morning time, they're going to be now observing this tree with different gold and silver balls and things on it. So now here we see who the true believers, the true followers of Yahawashi and the Most High, and what we are going to be decorating in spirit and in truth, and what they're going to be decorating in spirit, which is a wicked spirit, and in falsehood or lies, right? So now, verse 58, thus were there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season, in the winter season, from year to year by the space of 8 days. So every year we keep it 8 days. We read in last week in 2 Maccabees where it tells us that we kept the 8 days like the Feast of Tabernacles, meaning the same offerings and customs that we did back then, we would also do it during the Feast of Tabernacles. I'm sorry, during the Feast of Dedication. So it says, from the 25th and 20th day of the month Caslu, with myrrh and gladness. So this is a joyous occasion, right? This is our Thanksgiving. This is our deliverance. Most High raised up Savior, Mattathias to Judas, Maccabees, and the rest of his brothers with the Assyrians and all the rest of those who now stood by the laws. So this was a good thing, right? We didn't fall all the way to the nations as far as for what they wanted, what they thought to do. Verse 60, at that time also they builded up the Mount Sion with high walls and strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. So now you had to build up a defense because it was just too easy for them to come in certain areas and their military could come and do the same thing. So they said, we're going to build up strongholds now. We got to fortify our area so that we now have some form of protection against any new new forces that was going to come in and try to do the same thing again. Verse 61, and they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortify Bethsura to preserve it. So you see Esau also goes in different countries and he sets up garrisons or posts where they have their forces there and their military there, and they're like the first line of defense, to check out and see what's going on, so they can now report back, hey, something's going on, and people trying to do insurrection or whatever, but these people will be the first ones to be able to sound the alarm. So that's what they did. They set up different garrisons in that area to fortify Bethsura. It says that the people might have a defense against Idumea, right? And who is Idumea? Idumea is Esau or Edom, right? Which was what at that time we knew them to be who? The Greeks. The Greeks are Idumea because that's who they was fighting against. So the scriptures give you the whole 411. Because if you didn't know who Idumea was, you now know based on who Judas and them was fighting against. It was the Greeks. They were the ones in power. Who are the Greeks? It's the same ones who now, you got people who know that they're Greek. They'll say that they're from Greece, but they look just like the rest of their European brethren. So how can it be anything other? Right? So now we get more understanding from the scriptures. And this is why some of this that we're reading in here calculatingly had to be removed from out of the regular Bibles because it's straight up history, right? This is just straight. This is not a lot of parables. There's no deep, dark breakdowns into this. This is just going into the actual history of what was going on. Paquat.
That's great. This is, we can never take away what happened or what the Maccabean did, which is symbolizes, how we were pushing back against Greek Hellenism. But as we fast forward to today, we are dedicating and remembering the temple of the Most High. But we don't have a temple right now to dedicate, right? As far as like physical temple.
Mm-hmm.
Let me not say that. We do have physical temple to dedicate because everything that the Most High was doing with the temple and the way he wanted the temple to everything to be perfect in measurement and sacrifice, everything has to be done exactly to a T, but measurement, everything, how he did it. It's the same way the Most High was always alluding to us to be that temple, right? So that's pretty much what it comes down, right? Whereas we remember the temple, but don't forget that we are the temple of the Most High, the children of Israel. We are the temple of the Most High. So we should always keep ourselves as that temple because that's a significant, the physical temple is a significant. And all that the Most High was doing, we still didn't get it. To the point where the Most High don't give us any temple anymore, but we are still here, right? So that we can get the idea that we are the temple that the Most High. Just want to read one scripture.
Are you going to Corinthians?
I was going to go there.
I want to, so it's 3, right?
Yeah.
Corinthians is 1. If you could read,
2 Corinthians?
No, 1 Corinthians 3. Oh, I
was gonna do the second.
All right. So 1 Corinthians 3 and 16 to 17. But before we get to 1 Corinthians 3, 16 to 17, Colossians chapter 2 and verse 17, based on what you just said, right? Colossians chapter 2 and verse 17 says, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. What does that mean? How does that reference in? Because some of the things that we were taught through the law was a shadow of things to come, right? The way in which we learn how to erect, dedicate, consecrate the temple, and then offer up sacrifices in the temple was a shadow of how those things would transcend to now who? We as being the temple. Now we have to dedicate ourselves to the Most High in the same capacity that we dedicated the temple, right? Same way we had holy vessels and different things in there, we got to now do holy works, actions to now sacrifice and dedicate to the Most High. But again, those things were a schoolmaster to now evolve into what it is now, where we are the temple. We were always a temple, but we would not have really gotten it if the Most High would have said, you know what, you're the temple. All Israel, y'all the temple of the Most High. And we'd have been like, well, what does that mean? I don't know what I need to do. He could have said it, but we would have never really taken it to heart. So we had to go through all those generations of us having a temple, and then the Most High take it away. And like, what are we going to do now? We can't worship the Most High. We can't sacrifice to the Most High. That's why you got brothers now saying, y'all can't keep these high holy days, man. We ain't got the temple. Not realizing that that was just a stand-in to get to us. We are the ones that the Most High wanted to be dedicated to him, right? Now, when you go to 1 Corinthians 3:16, he says, know ye not that ye are the temple of God? Not what Moses and them did in the wilderness. Not what Solomon did when his father wanted to, not that, right? And that's why he was making, I ain't want to say mockery, but that's why he said what he said. He was like, you think you're going to build a temple for me? Like, you know who I am, where I dwell at? You think I'm going to fit, right? But this is going to be a process to get to a place where we can understand how we are the temple of the Most High to dedicate it. It says, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. If any man defile the temple of God, like how the Greeks was defiling the temple with what? All these unclean acts, all these unclean foods, right? That's how they defiled the carnal temple. But we the spirit, we're the real temple. So we can't defile ourselves like how they did that back then and seduce us into following that. So it says, if any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, separate, clean, which temple ye are, right? We're the sanctified ones. We're the separate. No one else is like us, right? We're the salt of the earth, meaning no one has these commandments, not us singing and dancing and playing sports. We do all these things in the earth. That's not what Yahushua was talking about. He was talking about these laws that sets us apart from every nation on the planet earth. Because if you're thinking of singing and dancing, what's the lady that's in the UK that sings? The heck that I can't think of her name. She was going out with LeBron James' manager. Adele, right? Adele. Someone says, yeah, if it's singing, well, Adele can sing. She's from the other nations, but she could sing, right? So, hey, so we include her too, right? She's coming to the cookout too? No. This is different. The laws was only given to the nation of Israel. It's not pertaining to playing sports or how great you could draw on. It's pertaining to the commandments and those things that we do. That's what makes us the salt. That's why we're supposed to be the ones that's in the forefront teaching everyone else the law, because it wasn't given to them, right? So that's why the law was very specific about this, that you can't defile the temple. You can't defile yourself. You was made to be holy. So now if you had the temple and we saw we should do sacrifices, one more and I'll let you get yours. Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 and verse 1. Write all these down. So Romans 12 and 1 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, because we are the temple. So now we got to go out and do the things of sacrifice, not with animals, but our actions. Holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Just like it talks about in Ecclesiastes 12, this is the whole duty of man. It's your reasonable service or duty to sacrifice ourselves or do good works to the Most High for Yahushua and for the rest of the nation. That's what we're here for. That's what we're still going to be doing in the kingdom, right? It's not going to change. It's not going to end. Be quiet.
2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16.
Mm-hmm.
And it reads, and what agreement has the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living power. As God has said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Right? So the Most High pretty much made it straight that he doesn't want us to deal with idols, because he says we are his temple. He want to dwell in us, right? He want to dwell in us as his temple. So therefore, we got to make ourselves clean and holy, and then we shall be his people.
Right.
Right. So showing that his people are the actual, they are the temple of the Most High.
Good. Now, one last scripture before we close out. Oh, Salat.
The one that Karan just pulled links with Paul's actually referring to Leviticus 26.
Leviticus 26. (11 and 12), where it says, Leviticus 26 and 12, because we know, or verse 11 rather, because we know before we had the temple, we had the tabernacle, right? Pretty much serves the same purpose. It says, and I will set my tabernacle amongst you, and my soul shall not abhor you. And I will walk among you, and will be your God, and ye shall be my people.
God.
And, I mean, we dedicate a physical temple, do everything to a T, but if we don't understand what it's about, it's just like we have done nothing, right? Even though we dedicate the physical, let's say we had a physical temple, and we do everything the way the Most High tell us to do it, but yet we don't understand that spiritual temple the Most High is doing, so that we can coincide with what we just did. It just does. We missed the point.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was saying in Matthew, the 23rd chapter, it says, even so, 28, Matthew 23:28 says, even so, ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Right? So the temple, you can be looking nice on the outside as a regular temple, but if the spirit is not right, it just doesn't mean anything. Most I cannot go in.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to read John 10:22. Right? We read this last week, but I'm going to read this now. Again, this is John 10:22 that confirms what we just read in the book of the Maccabees. It says, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. Right? So we read in Maccabees, the 4th chapter, about it being in the mean season, the 9th month. So now here it is that in the gospel, it references the feast of the dedication. Why is this important? Because you got some people who don't see that the books of the Maccabees is canon, or the books of the Apocrypha altogether are canon, meaning they're valid, number one. Number two, you have other camps, some camps who figure and say, well, we don't have to keep the Feast of the Dedication. We don't have to keep Purim. We don't have to keep the days of Judas or Simon and all these different things because the Most High himself did not ordain it, right? Well, these men, when you read in Maccabees 4 and in 2nd Maccabees as well, I think 2nd Maccabees 10, they ordained that this should be kept every year in its season. So now this was during the times of the Greeks, but now in the times of the Romans, the Jews is now keeping the Feast of Dedication. Why? If it was something that was not supposed to be kept, or they were just supposed to keep it at their time that they was living at that season, why is it being mentioned here that it is a feast of a dedication that's being kept now during the times of the Romans? That means what these men set up, same thing with Purim, same thing with the other ones, it still standeth. 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am. So their oath, what they solidified, is what's kept in scripture. So somebody can't come and say, well, if it ain't Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, I ain't keeping it. If it ain't the Passover time, I ain't keeping it. Well, here, how do we validate what's here in the gospel, in the New Testament? Right? Where did this feast come from? Right? It came from the history of what these men did based on what the Greeks was trying to do and how they rededicated the temple. Right? Because there isn't no feast in the Old Testament that says you keep the Feast of Dedication. You ain't gonna read that in Leviticus, right? You're not gonna read that in the Old Testament. That history is found here in the Maccabees. So for those who get, seduced into thinking, oh, we don't have to keep that holy day, only keep these other ones, then that's something wrong because it's now validated and confirmed here in the New Testament with Yahushua even being present at that feast.
And if they say that also, it's because they don't understand the real meaning behind it too.
Right.
Because if you understand the real meaning behind it, it's not so much about the day; it's about what happened in our culture and the spiritual aspect of it that propel us to keep it.
Right. We just saw in the video, in the little clip, that I showed from the press conference, that they trying to still validate and use it, right, for their own benefit. Even that's not even them.
They don't even understand it.
They don't understand it, but they still using it, right, or trying to use it to, solidify their campaign and announce that they're doing. But
Who was this? Who's this?
Huh? Oh, well, I showed the clip of the President Zelensky Biden conference that happened 2-3 days ago, and in the press conference, the Biden references Hanukkah and the warriors that was fighting against an opposition and all this other. Like, he went into detail about this that happened to us, but referenced Zelensky because he's Amalek, right? To give the impression, to give the facade that this is their historical fight, and now they're in another one. That's what it was supposed to present to the masses, to the audience. But it's really us, and we don't realize, we don't see it.
And I can see that the Jewish people orchestrated this whole thing to solidify their thing, on a high level. He's the president of the United States. Everybody gonna hear it. So now they think that they the Jews.
Come.
So it's a setup.
Yeah.
Zelensky over there looking like his fitness coach.
And at a time when there's controversy around Jewish people, are they the real Jews? We saying that we're the real Jews and stuff like that. So with him saying that, a lot of people will see the president said, so we validate him. And I mean, if we know he's a puppet. At a time when that thing is in controversy, you should, say, you know what, this thing is in controversy. I'm not gonna say it because people question it whether it's fact, and let me not say this. But he went along and said it because they told him to say it.
So we read earlier in the service about, as a man of the ruler, so are his officers, right? So people follow suit, right? The head honcho say.
Good. Okay, so this concludes the service for tonight. Again, this is the 8th and last night. This is the closing service for the Feast of Dedication. So at sundown tomorrow will be the end, and we'll be going back to our regularly scheduled 7-day Sabbaths, because I know we were able to cook on this past 7th-day Sabbath, but we'll go back to our normal commandment as far as for refraining from all of our pleasures of cooking and things of that nature. Lord's will, everybody is enjoyed this feast, enjoyed the services, enjoyed the history, probably learned something new, or the Spirit probably sparked something new, because that's always something good too. When you're reading certain things and the Spirit sparks something different that you've been reading for years, and you have a different perspective or aspect about something that's in the scriptures. So Lord's will, we were able to grow some new flowers or buds off this branch, and then be able to still sustain and draw in more water until the time comes when Yahushua reveals himself. So with that, I want to say again, Ashar Kanakah, a happy Feast of Dedication. Most High's will, everybody enjoys the remaining evening on into the morning. And then also keep in mind that we still have the Tuesday and Friday night classes. If there's any questions that you cannot answer tonight, please bring them to the classes, or even comments, certain aspects you want to bring out, or any other thing that you may have on your mind, please bring them to the class. So with that, again, I'm Kahana Priest Samat, Ashar Kanakah, happy feast, and Lord's will, everybody, be safe, be warm, and stay in good spirits. All right, stay tuned. Oh, also, we post the information for anyone who's going to look to do donations, because this is a feast day. If you wanted to send your donations in for the feast, as the Most High commands us that everybody has to present an offering to the Lord on his feast day. Again, you make your donations, check, money order payable to Hayasharala Kanas, not HYK, not Church of Israel, but Hayasharala Kanas, as it is written on the Badatika, because that's how it is within the at the bank. That's how it's ordered within as a institution. And then if you want to do it digitally, you could also do it through PayPal, right? You could do a paypal.me HYK/HYK12, right? Please, think of not just, us in these times, think about others as well, who are probably going through certain things. Reach out to them to see if everybody's in good spirits or just safe and sound. What's going on within this season with this bitter coldness. So just reach out and check on somebody. All right. So with that, again, shalom and then stay tuned for the closing prayers.
Shalom.
Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathanawa, Par Yahagapin, Thawada Amun, La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ath Yasha Allah. English translation. Blessed are Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai, or the Most High God in the name of Christ, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai with Israel. I Madra upon your Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem for the closing prayers. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Baba Kushah, Shammai, Lanawa, Aitha, Yum Yun, Aitha, Shalat, Mayaka Allah, Baha Alahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shemaiah, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Wahakazayat, Banya, Yasha Allah, Washalat, Lanawa, Rabium, Kakama, Rabium, Ta'ai, Rabium, Bayana, Rabium, Sabalanwa, Rabium, Amawan, Rabium, Aqua, Rabium, Ahabium, Rabium, Hagana, Rakhanaya, Wasalat, Kal, Kata Ayamnawa, Laha Akim, Wa Akiwa, Wa Yasha'ala, Thum Yad, Wa Iwalam, Bahasham, Yahawashai, Thawada, Amun. Again, the English translation. Most High, in the name of Christ, pleases it to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers or angels to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins for the brothers and sisters in Israel, always and forever. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Blessing for the food first. Yeah. Okay. Yahweh, Gadawal, Bahasham, Adawanya, Yahweh Shai, Baba Kushah, Barak, Ma'akal, Yanawa, Shatayawa, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lakam, Yanawa, Shakarai, Yanawa, Zakad, Shaw, Kanaka, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Thawada, Amun. All right. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabat Yasaparium, Shema, Yasharallah, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, All right. So with that, we'll say Shah Kanaka. Happy Feast of Dedication. Most High's will. Everybody stand strong, stay in the spirit, and enjoy the rest of the day. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.